Good evening and welcome to the August 20th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission in the City of Glendale. Just a quick announcement. Due to the evolving situation with the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, the Historic Preservation Commission meeting will be available to the public electronically. Due to social distancing requirements, the public will not be able to attend the meeting. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to practice social distancing. The meeting can be viewed on local cable, Charter Channel 6, or AT&T UVerse Channel 99, or by streaming online through the city's website. For public comments and questions during our meeting, you can call the phone number 818-937-8100. Again, that's 818-937-8100, and the number will appear on the screen throughout the meeting. All right, so let's get started. Roll call, please.
All right, roll call. Chair Crignani?
Here.
Commissioner Doom?
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka?
Oh, you're muted, Kathy.
Commissioner Yurka?
We see her.
You're
Trust
on
me, I
mute.
know she's there.
I can't see the screen, I only see.
Oh yeah, she's here. There we go, Kathy. You're unmuted.
Okay, that was official.
Yes.
Where'd we go? Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
And Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
Everyone's here.
Great. The agenda for the August 20th meeting, regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, was posted on Monday, August 17th on the bulletin board outside City Hall. I presume everybody's had a chance to review the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Crignani?
Yes.
Commissioner Doom?
Yes.
Commissioner Yurka?
She's
Abstain.
abstaining.
Yeah. So I think we have to hear it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not showing that she's got her mute button on, but we did not hear you, Kathy. Yeah, we see you saying it, but we're not hearing you. Maybe that that mic didn't work out or something, maybe.
Well, we know it's an abstention. I'm not sure that we have to hear it because we will have a majority.
Still didn't hear that,
nonetheless.
actually. Yeah, we're still not hearing you. But we know it's an abstention because you weren't on the commission at that point. So we're good with that, but maybe you guys can work on the microphone. Okay.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Okay.
Approved 4-0 with one abstention.
With one abstention. Thank you. Now we move into oral communications. This is an opportunity for the public to call in using that phone number 818-937-8100. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The Glendale Historic Preservation Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. Let's see if we have any callers. No calls for oral communications. We will move on to board and commissioner member comments. Well, first, I would like to, before I welcome our newest member, Catherine Yurka, I do want to say thank you to our longtime member, Desiree Shire. She was on the commission, we think, better part of a decade, if not more. She served Glendale very well. She was a really great advocate for Glendale's historic resources, and she had a keen eye for detail that I know I will miss. I'm sure my fellow commissioners will miss. And so we all thank her very, very much for her service. And I do want to welcome Catherine Yurka to the commission. She's new to us this year. It's her first meeting in the age of Corona. How exciting. She was most recently the Vice President of Preservation Advocacy and Chair of the Preservation Advocacy Committee for the Glendale Historical Society. She currently teaches film and American literature at Caltech, and she lives in a historically designated home. She's in a historic register home in the Neodraro neighborhood, and we are very lucky to have Ms. Yurka on the commission as well. So welcome. Any other comments from anybody else?
Well, I did want to say something on.
Oh, even in the age of Corona. All right, buddy, bring it on.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say, it's with heavy heart that I and we, the HPC, have to bid farewell to our most knowledgeable and beloved Commissioner Shire. Having served alongside her for these last 10 years on the HPC, it has been a joy and a pleasure on this commission. No one has been more dedicated throughout than she has, both as a chairperson, as commissioner. Our discussions have been most thorough with foresight, which helped to make this body in Glendale so much more precise, fascinating, in the forefront of historic preservation. You always say commissions reflect their members, and I can truly say we have had the best with Desiree Shire. I know I have learned from her knowledge and expertise. I am and have been a better commissioner because of her. But on top of that, more thoughtful and concerned in how we apply all the regulations and rules in a concise manner consistently, which more than often not gets lost. Last, thank you, Commissioner Shire. Your many years of pushing us to be better have made the HBC far greater than it could have been, and it has been an honor to serve next to you. I'm done.
Thank you, Mike. That was very well said, Mike. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, and I would also like to echo Commissioner Morgan's comments. I don't think I could have said it better myself. I'm very sorry that Commissioner Shire will no longer be a member of this board, but I'm very grateful for the time I had to serve alongside her, for her leadership, for her expertise. As Commissioner Morgan said, I think we all grew and learned so much. I do consider her a friend at this point over the years, and I hope we do cross paths in the Rossmoyne neighborhood. I also would like to, I'm thrilled actually to have Commissioner Yurka join us. I think you have been one of the strongest voices for historic preservation in Glendale for some time now, and I very much look forward to working alongside you on this board, and I know we will benefit from your presence as well, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorna. Nick, I think you're muted. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. It's very hard to follow those two. But just very quickly, I would like to also share my sadness for Desiree's departure. I too echo Lorna and Commissioner Morgan, and I've learned a lot from her and appreciate her patience and education with me. And she has some very big shoes to fill. And Catherine, I think you are very equal with your past and present to fill that task. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Catherine, you want to say anything? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, we're still not hearing you. Okay, you're good.
We're signed.
Okay. So, do you want us to move on?
I just
Or do you want us to take a break?
I wanted to welcome
Oh, sorry.
Catherine.
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
If that's okay. It is, as sad as it is to lose Commissioner Shire, it is with great joy to welcome our newest member, Catherine Yurka. Though many of you know her from her many historic preservation efforts with the Glendale Historical Society and the South Glendale Community Plan, and I was going to go into wrapping all the stuff she did with the South Glendale Community Plan, but I've decided I'll keep it short and make efforts too many to list. We now welcome, happily, Commissioner Yurka.
Thank you, Mike. No, we can't hear you now. Do you want us to take a quick recess? Yes, we're going to take a, no? But let's take a 2-minute recess just to see if we can get your
Right.
microphone going.
We don't have to make it an official recess. We'll just see if she's trying to do that on.
Okay, and we're back. Ms. Yurka, you wanted to say a few things.
I did. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cognati. I just wanted to thank everyone for the warm welcome and to say that I'm very happy and honored to be able to serve on the Historic Preservation Commission, and also that I share your very high opinion of Desiree Shire as well, and she'll be missed. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
And then staff wants to throw in a welcome to Kathy and also a farewell to Desiree, who really went above and beyond over her many years here and really helped us with her keen eye and just her insight into how buildings work and what we're looking for. So We're going to miss her, but we're happy to have Kathy. But I think what's interesting is we're losing one Glendale Register property owner, but we're gaining another.
Oh, it's a
You guys are really walking the walk. So
wow, it's a swap. Look at that. Good job, guys. Okay, moving on to old business. 1106 Ross Moyne Avenue has appeared again on our agenda, and it does, because this item does require site visit for us to really be able to have any debate or decision about it. We are going to, I would like a motion, please.
actually, we don't need to do that. This is, I learned, this is at the chair's discretion to continue to a date uncertain, but let me just toss in, it's not just because of the site visit, it's been a very difficult process trying to organize with the property owner, and this situation has been dragging out for a very long time. When we are all able to get together, I'm going to give the owner every opportunity for us to make a visit and then have a meeting and come to a decision. But if that continues to be a problem, I probably will recommend that the commission, we just move on.
Okay.
And unfortunately, that would mean removing the property from the Glendale Register, because in its current state, it isn't eligible for the register, and this is a weird snafu that we can explain at greater length once we're actually on the item. So.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are moving that to a date uncertain. Number 7, new business. Item A is Nibley Park, the Glendale Register nomination of 1103 East Mountain Street, Nibley Park in the Ross Moyne neighborhood. Jay, you have a presentation for us.
Yes, I do. As soon as I there we go. Share my screen and expand the screen. Oh, it's not. Now you're getting a preview of all of that. Do I need to do anything more?
Everybody close your eyes.
So, last February, City Council was considering an upgrade of some toilets and partitions and sinks in Nibley Park, and through the miracle of decision-making said, well, let's nominate Nibley Park also as, as a result of that.
Council said that?
Approval, yes. So council directed the nomination of Nibley Park as a city-owned property, which I think is cool because it's in line with the Historic Preservation Commission's long-time interest in getting city sites to be designated over the years. So this will be yet another property that's owned and the responsibility of the city, that we're kind of showing our community that we take our historic resources seriously, and we expect that they do too once they choose to have them designated or when they're living in historic districts. So in terms of Nibley Park, I put together a bunch of slides that kind of take us through the history. A lot of this is old news to the Historic Preservation Commission because Nibley Park is part of the Ross Moyne Historic District, so it's already a contributing feature of the Historic District, and it's also intrinsically tied to the history of the Ross Moyne subdivision and the development of this neighborhood, starting in the early in 1924-25 by the Haddock Nibley Company that later became the Nibley Investment Company. So you're hearing the word Nibley a lot. That was the name of two cousins who were C.W. and Alex Nibley, who were involved in the subdivision and ultimate development of Ross Moyne. And what I think, well, let's start here because I think this picture is cool because it shows Ross Moyne as it was just getting off the ground, and you can see the fields of citrus groves, the well-laid tree pattern. And I've highlighted in approximate fashion, I'm not sure I did a perfect job on that, the green patch is the location of Nibley Park. And what's interesting looking at this, if you just look at the leading edge of this, and I think you can probably see my cursor, it looks like there were even some regular planted orange trees kind of just along the north edge of Mountain Street at the time the park was developed. The rest of the area is the kind of natural tree cover of the Glendale foothills with oaks and sycamores. That's still an important part of Nibley Park today. So what's especially interesting historically about this park in this neighborhood is that the Haddock Nibley Company decided to donate the land for the park to the city. So they basically took 2.5 acres of their subdivision and told the city, here's a park. We want this to be for the benefit of our residents. And that's not it's not unheard of, but it's not the most common thing for developers to do. And I think it stands in interesting contrast to Brockmont Park, one of our other foothill historic districts, where the developers of that subdivision created a private park for that neighborhood. So it was kind of like parks in England and Gramercy Park in New York, where you had to have a key or special access to get into the park, and it was for residents only. What's interesting is that park ultimately got sold off and subdivided. So it seems like a very wise thing for the Nibleys to have donated this to the city, so it stayed in city ownership and remains a park today. Of course, it was also kind of a marketing scheme on their part. So this generous donation was also something that was part of the calculation of their bottom line as developers. In the staff report, we also talk about, just as with many of our other foothill neighborhoods in other parts of Glendale, we had very racist, restrictive covenants and practices placed on the development of this neighborhood, saying that the neighborhood was not welcome for non-white residents. We call this a public park, and it was always a public park owned by the city. I think it's worth thinking about, especially at this point in our history, what does public mean? This probably wasn't what I would think, or we should think, is a public park over many years. Today, I hope that we don't have anything happening there, but we did have issues going on in other parks within Glendale. So I did some research, very superficial research, but looking through the LA Times and the Los Angeles Sentinel, trying to see if there was any mention of Nibley Park in the way that there had been mention of Hindenburg Park, now Verdugo, the county park, which was the scene of National Socialist and Nazi gatherings. There's no information that Nibley Park ever served this function, but it's part of the history that I think is worthy of further development. City councils directed city staff people in different divisions and agencies to start looking into kind of ethnic and racial heritage and how it's been handled in Glendale over many years. And so hopefully we can tell part of the story through looking at Nibley Park and other public parks. Moving on, we have a really nice collection of early photographs of Nibley Park, showing it in its earliest years. Here's one that was published in the LA Times among some of other aspects of Glendale, just kind of a blurb about the popularity of this new residential suburb. But going into a scrapbook that a resident of Rossmoyne prepared that's now in the collection of the Glendale Public Library, a number of those photos are just fascinating documents showing Nibley Park and then the surrounding development, houses under construction. And the wonderful thing you'll see in this is the row of palm trees that you see planted kind of following the curve of Mountain Street there. And this is exactly the same thing we see in the early photographs of Royal Boulevard, which was phase 2 of the Rossmoyne subdivision, also done by the Nibley Investment Company. And so I haven't found any information to say which came first. Did they happen around the same time? They were developed around the same time. So I can't say, but it's the same concept, the same species as best I can tell. And it's kind of interesting that it's, you know, these very non-native palm trees contrasted with the very native sycamores and oaks that primarily made up the park at the time. So we'll just look at a few other images.
Wow.
Not much going on, but the park is there. And you can see that there was a very light, what looks like a chain, probably a chain, but could be a rope kind of railing / fence running along the front of the park. And we still have something like that today, and I think that's an important character feature, and we'll talk about that a little more later, but the idea that there's always been this kind of separation from the street, obviously for safety reasons, but it could come to help us in the future if anyone ever proposed a very tall fence along the park. We could say historically that's very inappropriate. Historic Preservation Commission would have to review that. Another shot looking down from the west, and then looking into the trees. And I think you can see here that the tree cover and the canopy was much more dense than it is today. I think when the subdivision was laid out, it was basically just take a walk through the woods kind of thing, where today it's a much more typical park space with passive and active areas for the public.
Do you think that was just natively how it was?
I don't know that they would have been able to grow these trees that quickly, so I have to assume they seem somewhat regularly spaced.
They
There's
do.
a chance that Judge Ross had something to do with that.
Oh.
I don't know anything about that history, but these are the native trees of our area, and you see them in Verdugo Park and other areas. So this picture is interesting. If you look on the very far right, there's a little structure here with a tile roof that I believe is inside the park boundary. It certainly looks like it would be given the topography and where the street is. I have no idea what that was. It could have been a restroom building or storage building, but it looks like kind of a nice little structure. Obviously, that's long gone. Although you can see a few benches, a trash can, so definitely amenities for public use. A couple of pathways are visible. Another shot with some of the cars of the era. This one, I think, is a later shot than the
Yeah,
others.
the trees are much taller.
Yeah. Yes, I don't say I think
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. And then we have some shots of the park today. So someone from the city chose to plant Chinese elms kind of interspersed between the palm trees at the front. There's a low fence again, obviously not that original rail or the chain or rope rail. And then looking toward the street, we see the neighborhood's fully developed, looking into the park. And some of these trees are venerable. They've been there a long time, and you don't see those multi-trunked stands that you see in that photograph. Does that mean some of those were thinned out, but some of the trees have grown subsequently? I don't know that we're going to learn exactly what happened here, but we can presume that a lot of the trees certainly predate the park. I don't know that they predate Judge Ross, but there's a good chance that they do. So here we see the tennis court that was added in the 1960s. Here we have a fun image from the LA Times showing our Glendale Tennis Pro with the women from the neighborhood taking lessons. And there are no known historic features in the park aside from the fact that it is an open park space.
Don,
Oh
Some
I
of the
gotta call you back.
trees are very likely original
Bye.
or certainly early. But when we look at this stone wall that's adjacent to the tennis court, I can't say how old this is. And I've checked with the Parks Department, and they don't have a good chronology of the history of this park, so they weren't able to give me dates for a lot of the features that we have. So when I went through the list of potential character-defining features, I included this series of two walls here next to the tennis court, along with another wall we'll see in a second. You can sort of see in the background here. Here's the contemporary bathroom building. There's a good chance this would be in the location of that little Spanish building if that were a bathroom, since that suggests there would have been plumbing lines and sewer lines in place. And then this wall to me is also of interest because it looks old. Is it original? I have no idea. And what's interesting, knowing the Rossmoyne neighborhood relatively well, and some of you probably know it much better than I do, there's a lot of rubble stone wall construction for retaining walls along some of the streets, and then also on private property. And when you look at those stones, they tend to be rounded kind of river stones with a rounded profile, and they're usually set in mortar. So what we see is this house in the background. Nibley Park is surrounded on three sides by residential development, and then Mountain Street on the south. The property line is at this chain link fence, which obviously isn't original. What's interesting is there's a gate in the fence, and then we come down to these old stone steps that form a break in this stone wall we just saw. That suggests that this house has long had access into the park as one of the perks, I guess, of living next to the park. But the stone changes from the stonework you see on the property to the stonework you see on the parkland. And what you have here are much more angular stones. They're dry laid without mortar. It just has a different quality. So again, it's an open-ended question at this point whether this is original. It's likely to be an early feature, and I've included it in our list of character-defining features, which I think is important here because the park really doesn't have the typical kinds of things that we look at as a commission in terms of protecting the space. So I'm recommending that we really look at the park as a cultural landscape as much as anything. But we do have features. I included this slide just to show how prominent, how the interface between the open park space and the neighborhood. This is a small parking area that was installed relatively recently to provide a handicap space for the park. And then here is a shot looking back up toward the street. Long mountain, down the other way, palm trees fully grown now. And thinking about this brick and wood fence, I don't know when it was built, the Parks Department doesn't have a record. You can see it, what I believe is the same fence in the background at the very top of this photo that's partially obscured by the, at least on my screen, I'm not sure, oh, there it goes. So I'm pretty sure that's the same fence, and this article is from 1977. It's not in great shape, so I imagine at some point there may be a move to replace it. When that happens, that will be reviewed with the knowledge that this is a Glendale Register property. And then I close the slideshow just with the kind of a picture from the higher portion of the park looking down. I'll just read a quick list of the character-defining features just so that the commission knows what staff is recommending we look at, and then you can discuss your thoughts on that as we enter your deliberation. So we're looking at the palm trees along the Mountain Street frontage, oak and sycamore trees within the park. Those are already protected by the city, so it's not, we're not too worried they're all going to be torn down, cut down, whatever. I think something that's interesting is the juxtaposition of the palms with the more natural landscape. So thinking of that as a character-defining feature, which could even include the Chinese elms that are much more, well, I don't know, they're a more recent addition. I'm recommending the low fence. As the concept of a low fence be considered a character-defining feature, the fence that's in place right now, I would say is not a historic feature of the park, though it's a nice design, simple and seems to fit the somewhat rustic landscape. But I don't recommend that we designate that fence as it stands today. And then I also have the stone retaining walls next to the tennis court and at the back of the park that we just discussed. And then I think an important aspect of this, as a cultural landscape as well as a Glendale Register designated property, if it is ultimately designated, is just its use as a public park. And in general, we don't determine or expect a building to have a certain use. We, in fact, as a field, expect that buildings may have different uses over the years, and it's our job to make sure that those uses are compatible with the historic structures that we're thinking about. A park space is different, and I would think that this open space should be something that we protect. If we don't, something like the large construction project slated for Central Park could theoretically happen here, although I don't picture that happening. The zoning wouldn't allow it. But just in terms of broadening the scope of character-defining features beyond our normal scope, I think we should look at it that way. So staff is recommending that the park is eligible under two criteria. Criterion one, association with significant events that are important in the broad cultural, political, economic, social, tribal, or historic heritage of the nation, state, or city. In this case, the importance is limited to the city, but it has, strong associations with its early donation to the city and its development as a public park. I also think it's eligible under criterion 2 for associations with significant people, particularly for Alex Nibley. And what's interesting about Nibley is not only did he and his firm donate the park to the city, the park takes their name. I don't know if that was a gift to them or if they actually wanted it to be named after them. You can guess yourselves. But he also chose to live in Ross Moines and actually moved from Lafayette Square in Los Angeles, which is a really beautiful neighborhood, and chose to come to the foothills of Glendale to live with his family in a house that still stands on Ross Moines Avenue. So that's the staff report, and I welcome any questions if you've got any. And I'm unsure.
Jay, I have a couple of quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the restrooms are currently being remodeled, and I don't know if that, I mean, I guess that's already happening, and those designs are, I'm not sure exactly what the remodeling looks like. Was that something you had an opportunity to review, knowing this designation might be coming forward, or how do we,
No,
what does that look like when, I think you just touched on buildings in the park.
yeah, going back to council asking us to prepare this nomination, that goes back to when the Parks Department went to council requesting funding for repairs to the restroom. All of that work was on the inside of the building, so everything you see from the exterior is going to be the same. The Parks Department did contact me before we went to council for that, to make sure that, you know, there were no issues, and because it is a contributing feature of the Ross Moines Historic District, HPC and the city have design review purview over everything that you can see from the street, which is pretty much the entire park, except for the interior of this bathroom. So there were no issues in terms of moving forward with that project.
Okay, so that's all just interior work, because I haven't personally seen any drawings or anything.
Yeah, there's
It's all interior.
nothing proposed
Okay,
to the exterior.
And then I just had one more quick question. The oak and sycamore trees throughout the park, is there some way, you know, over the past several years, tree replacements we've noticed have mostly been pine. Is there a way we can make some kind of recommendation that trees being planted in the park going forward sort of keep in line with the original trees?
I don't see why not. We could express that recommendation to the Community Services and Parks Department. We could let the Urban Forestry team know that that's something the commission would like to see, if that's something you should vote on, and then we'll bring that to City Council for the final approval. It seems like a good idea to me. There are some big pine trees in there that have been there for a long time, but I sure think that you're right, that we ask property owners who remove oak trees to replace one oak tree, for example, with 4 new oak trees in many cases. And if the city were to do the same or something similar, I can't say that we'd replace them in a certain number. But yeah, I think that's something we can move forward with.
Thank you. I mean, if I have the support of my colleagues, and I guess not only for replacements, but for any new plantings. There have been some new plantings that I don't think were specifically for something taken out. We don't know how that works, to be honest. Can I make additional comments now, or are we just doing questions and then we'll go to comments?
Well, actually, let me just see if there's any public.
Well, actually,
Okay.
we're still in the questioning staff. If no one else has any questions,
questioning.
then you can open the public hearing.
Anybody else, any other commissioners have any specific questions? No? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, though I don't see any callers for this item, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And now we will move on to commissioners' comments about this item. Lorna, do you want to start? You had some things to say.
Sure, and I'm going to start by saying that I'm certain Commissioner Morgan will have some wonderful stories to tell us about Nibley Park.
Related to riding a bike.
And
From when he was a very young man.
Very young.
Growing up the street. But I just want to say that as chair of the committee which established the Ross Moines Historic District, starting work in fall of 2009 and reaching designation of 503 homes plus Nibley Park for 504 properties, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Nibley Park being nominated for the register. And I honestly was not aware at all that City Council had made this recommendation. So I would like to thank City Council for making this recommendation. Jay, I'd like to thank you for putting together the nomination. I think the gift that Alex Nibley gave to Ross Moyne is truly an asset today. It's still often, the park is, you know, always full with people playing tennis, birthdays being celebrated, you know, kids running around and playing. I know the Ross Moyne HOA, we hold our summer picnic in Nibley Park every year as part of our National Night Out event, and we typically have over 200 neighbors and residents attend, and so the park is still alive and still very much a part of this neighborhood, and I hope my colleagues will support this nomination. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mike, why don't you take off?
I'd like to, yes, well, Lorna, Commissioner Vartanian is correct. I spent a lot of time when I was 4, when we just moved in. We moved in June 1st, 1955 over Royal Boulevard. And one of the very first places my mother took me was to Nibley Park. So in June of 55. So I've been around that park for a long, long, long time. It's surprising there's a lot there. I mean, the bathrooms aren't the same, and the perimeter fence isn't the same. But most of it, I mean, when I was there, the tennis courts were there, and that was the big thing. You get up early in the morning, use the tennis courts before everybody else did. So, but this is before I had a bicycle, so I used to walk over there with my friends.
There was a time that you didn't have a bicycle, Mike? Shocked.
There was. I didn't get one till I was like 12, so I did all my walking everywhere. But it's surprising. I went and looked at it again today, and all of the back, the rubble stone and all that, that's the same stuff that was there when I was a little kid. I mean, we literally lit that park on fire many, 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 many years ago.
Oh, that was you?
Burning spider webs, yeah. But it made a lot of people very unhappy, but we were like 6, so, you know, what did we know? But walking through it today, you know, there's so much that's still there. You know, I mean, it's a great place, and I have lots and lots and lots of memories. You know, we used to play tag football there a long time ago, and it was a place that everybody went. You know, if you weren't going to Vertigo Park, you were going to Nibley Park. So I agree wholeheartedly with my other commissioner. I mean, it definitely should be on the historic preservation, you know, the Glendale Register. There's not a lot that you can do. I mean, when you look at it, and I look at the what used to be there for the playground equipment was all made of metal. And, you know, the slides would get very hot in the summer because it would, you know, it was all metal. And we had a teeter-totter, and we had one of those little, you know, things that go around in a circle, and you get on, you start running, and you get people really sick in the whole bit. But all the stuff's really nice and safe today. You couldn't hurt yourself on it. But back then you could do, and jungle gyms, there were a lot of jungle gyms. So. But I'm happy that it's been, you know, nominated. I hope to forward that nomination, and people long after I'm gone will enjoy it as much as I did when I was a little kid. So.
Thanks, Mike. Nick, Kathy, would either of you like to say anything?
Yeah.
Kathy, great.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to say that it was a very pleasant surprise to see the nomination of Nibley Park on the agenda. I also did not know that council had requested this, and I'm really happy to see council nominating city-owned property as to the Glendale Register. I like the fact that it's being recognized for its open space. I think there is a lot of pressure on parks, a kind of turn toward active parks, and I think it's important to also keep spaces open for passive uses. And so I think that open space and passive use go together. I do like the idea of some kind of direction about the trees and landscaping. I do think we need to give the arborists some flexibility because of climate change. That they may want to experiment with different kinds of plants. Like, for example, sycamores are just getting decimated by the shot borer, I think it is. And so there may be constraints on what they can do, but I think where feasible, respecting the historic landscaping and trying to reproduce it is a good idea. Finally, I know this isn't a competition, but how do I get Vertigo Park? No, I think that's also historic, but that's a conversation for another time, and I will talk with my councilman.
Okay.
Hey,
Thank you.
Kathy, can I interject? Does your art predate the coronavirus behind you?
No. No, it is a coronavirus.
Okay.
These are two of these are viruses. Beautiful, beautiful viruses. So.
Interesting.
All right.
Groovy. Commissioner Doom, anything? You're good? Okay, you're good. Thank you. I'm going to echo everything everyone said. I, too, as a little boy, visited Nibley Park a lot. And, you know, we're very lucky in Glendale. We have some pretty amazing parks. I know there is a lot of conversation that there could always be more. But we are very lucky that we have such beautiful open space, so that the council is nominating or wants us to bring it forward as a historic resource, I think is terrific. And that they have, that every now and then they throw their historic preservation hat on, I think is really great, and we welcome them doing it anytime. Okay, so with that, do we have anyone, would anyone like to make a motion? Lauren, I think you're talking, but I think you're muted. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to make the motion. Jay, do I need to include in the motion anything about the trees, I guess, or?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
make it official. I've got it in my notes, but
Maybe Jay, would you like to read it back and she can just say?
sure, I could, and also taking into account what Kathy offered
Yes.
there. So the motion would be to recommend to City Council that Nibley Park be placed on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources with, I don't know that it's a condition, but with a recommendation to the Community Services and Parks Department that whenever possible, oak, sycamore, or other appropriate native plantings be used for either replacement of deceased plant material or for future additions to the park. So something like that.
How do you feel about that, Lorna?
I think I'm fine with it.
I don't know if deceased was the right
I will
word,
make
but-
that motion. Thank you, Jay.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. We have a first and a second. Let's have some roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Yurka,
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Doom,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Enthusiastically, yes.
and
All
Chair
right.
Cognati.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0, and we'll bring this to council sometime soon.
Great.
Chris, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I just want to, I'm going to restart my computer because the connection to the internet's a little funky.
Okay.
So you just can carry on. I'll just be back in a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Thanks.
We'll see you in a minute. Okay, with that, we will move on to item B, review of proposed procedure for implementing Mills Act program for contributing properties in designated historic districts. Jay, take it away.
All right, I'll introduce this one. I have a few slides that are really, really dense with words. This doesn't lend itself to pretty pictures. But before I go to those words, I'll start with my own just to introduce this. Back in 2016, City Council directed the Planning Division to begin the process of creating a Mills Act program for contributing properties in historic districts. And you'll notice that several years have passed since then. The reason for that is primarily that no interest had been shown from the community in this. I don't think the concept was publicized well or widely. And basically, for something like that, it was kind of like I was thinking, well, when someone wants this, we'll start the process. The first inquiry came in 2019, and one of our, a patient resident of one of our historic districts has been checking in with me regularly when I was giving him updates. Toward the end of 2019, I was getting ready to move into taking this on as a project. Another inquiry came in earlier this year, and then things kind of stayed in a holding pattern until now, when we're moving forward with this. There was a fair amount of background research that I did to kind of look to what other cities are doing, talking to colleagues in other cities about what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And the biggest issue here is that in Glendale, when we give a Mills Act contract, and for the public who may not be familiar with the Mills Act, it's a statewide program that is an effort to allow local municipalities to enter into contracts with property owners of historic properties, and in exchange for entering into a contract where that owner says that they're going to maintain the property at the highest levels of preservation and all work is going to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, in exchange for that, the city works with the county assessor's office to reduce the property taxes on that specific parcel. And what that means is it frees up thousands of dollars in most cases every year for property owners to use toward the ongoing maintenance of their Glendale Register properties. When we look at historic district properties and contributors, there's a difference between those and Glendale Register properties. And by definition, a contributor is not necessarily a historic property. Doesn't have historic meaning. It ultimately is important as part of an ensemble of buildings, part of the aggregate of a neighborhood, one grain and the many grains that give us the texture, feel, and look of a place. And so the idea that we would just give a Mills Act to those properties, and I shouldn't say we just give them to Glendale Register properties either. In many cases, the commission will put significant conditions on a contract, and we'll look at that later tonight in the case of a new construction that a house property owner had to do. But in the case of a contributing property, since we have right now over 700 contributors in our existing 7 historic districts, and if the 2 historic districts that are under consideration right now, plus a third that's been nominated, actually come into play, we'll have at least 1,100 contributing properties and probably more than that. So the idea of how do you choose one contributor over another became a major thought and issue in terms of determining how best to create a fair process for determining which of these contributing houses might be eligible for the Mills Act. So that was kind of the background in terms of what we've had to do to prepare for getting this kind of process in place. So what I'd like to do is show you some slides. We'll go over what was approved by the City Council in 2016 in terms of giving direction for the program. And then we'll also look at some of the concepts that staff has developed in terms of how to implement this and on what timeline to implement it. So here is the,
Go back to number 4. Oh, there we go.
all right, so here we go with the words. But this is the direction we received from City Council based on staff recommendations, input from the community and from the Glendale Historical Society in terms of how to proceed with the process. The concept was to allow Mills contracts for district contributors with the caveat that those houses, and this because we're dealing with single-family residential neighborhoods, so those houses would not be eligible for the Glendale Register. The idea is if a property is eligible for the register, we want it to be nominated for the register. If at the end of the day, Historic Preservation Commission didn't feel it was worthy of being on the register, or City Council didn't vote to place it on the register, it would still be a contributing structure, contributing building in the district, and could then be eligible once it was disproven in terms of its eligibility for the Glendale Register. Council established a valuation cap of $1.5 million for single-family residences. that's in keeping with what many of the other local cities who have mills programs for their properties. There's also a $3 million cap for any other property type. At this point, all of our historic districts are residential districts. We don't have multifamily, commercial, industrial buildings, but that doesn't mean that couldn't change in the future. So we have a cap for those other types as well.
Can you just explain what that means? Sorry, the valuation cap. What exactly
Oh,
does that mean?
the county assessor establishes the property tax basis for properties. A house, so the house is worth $1 million according to the county, and then is tax based on that. That's the number that we use. I anticipate that we may get some nominations for properties that have just changed hands and don't have a tax bill yet. But the tax is always based on the purchase price, so we can use the purchase price as a good estimate for what the valuation is.
So if a property is recently sold or recently purchased for $2 million, they wouldn't be eligible to
No,
be.
they would not be eligible.
Got it. So it has to be valued.
Yeah.
That it's not the Mills Act valuation you're talking about.
No, it's the
present,
non-Mills Act, just
Okay.
the regular valuation that the
and
county.
it's the county valuation. So if someone's been in their home that's worth $2.5 million, but they've been in it for so long that the county still values it at 900,
Right.
they're eligible.
They're eligible, but the Mills Act benefit is not very
may not be, right.
big
That's
for
true.
long-term owners.
Got it. That's
And that's something we would discuss as applicants came
Right.
in. I would let people know, do you really want to go through this process and this commitment, because you may not
May go up.
benefit. And the thing is, we can't tell people what their ultimate
We
tax
can't,
reduction
yeah.
is.
And actually, it would never go up. It would always be the lower of the two numbers, but still, right?
For single-family houses, yeah. There's some, we have a few situations where it's kind of backwards.
Really?
Yeah, but
Okay.
not,
Okay,
not
sorry.
typically. Because when this came forward, and in hindsight, this may seem funny, but I'm not sure that it really would be when we publicized this program. We were concerned that we would be deluged with applications from contributors. So we kind of presented to council the idea that we would guarantee that we're going to process 6 Mills Act contracts a year. But we also didn't want to kind of dissuade people from applying for the Glendale Register, and still saw the Glendale Register as our premier preservation program, because our historic districts are already doing something. We're already protecting those neighborhoods. So what we recommended was that we would guarantee up to 6 contracts a year. 4 of those would be for Glendale Register properties. The remaining 2 could be for contributors. If a year came through where we only had 2 or 3 Glendale Register nominations, then we could up the number of contributing nominations. And if staff time availability changes soon or in the future, we could go up from there. So that was the number that council agreed on, and that's the number we're sticking with for now. But it is funny that since 2016, we've only had 2 inquiries in the program, so the deluge didn't really come. But it could. And this, of course,
Once the word gets out.
this, of course, could change over time. So nothing is forever with a policy like this. We will, let me find myself. We'll establish an annual application process to just kind of control where we are as the year moves forward, to make sure that we're keeping tabs on all of the applications, keeping them in queue as they come in. And this is based on how other cities do it. Glendale Register properties kind of are taken under consideration on just a rolling basis as they come in. We don't have an annual cutoff point for applications or for consideration of nominations. And I recommend that we continue to treat the Glendale Register that way. But for the district contributors, we're recommending a timeline that I'll get into in a minute or so, that will be on an annual cycle. So if all of this is considered by the commission tonight, and whatever comments you have are going to be brought to council at an upcoming council meeting where they were already asking us to discuss historic districts. So this will likely be the time that we can bring them both an update on districts in general, and then also an update on the policy for this. So the recommendation is that we start the program in 2021. And the program is going to be merit-based. It's going to be a competitive system. And this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about how do we decide which of the hundreds of contributors out there are the ones that would both need the most work and also produce a public benefit that we can all enjoy to some degree. So I'm recommending a system for analysis and review of properties that ultimately will allow staff to prepare a ranked assessment of the nominations. And then each year, the commission and council will kind of go through that ranked analysis. Whether you accept the rankings or move things around, we'll see how that goes. But it's a way to kind of establish a relatively objective way to look at these nominations and consider them as we move forward. And the other issue that City Council took staff up on was that the entire property, if for a Glendale Register contributor, currently contributors are only reviewed in terms of their historic character and features based on what you see from the street. What we would like to do for these Mills Act contributors is look at the entire property just like we do for Glendale Register properties. So we still would not go into the houses, we're not going to look at interiors, but any portion of the exterior, which means garages, non-visible facades, walkways, pool decks, pools, fences, walls, all of that would be part of what we review in our design review. So let me just ask, since this is all a lot of talking and a lot of wordy slides, any questions on how this started and council's direction?
Commissioners? Any questions?
Do you still have more presentation for us?
Yes, I just didn't want to totally bombard you. But yes, I have
So if you have a
more.
question about anything he's presented to this point, maybe you should ask it now before we get too far into the rest of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Kathy.
I did have one question.
There was a little delay. Sorry, we are hearing you, but there's a little bit of a delay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Why would we not have a set calendar, Glendale Register applications, as well as historic district contributors, if we've got a set amount and it's just a way of organizing the process?
We could do that, but it would just be another thing for us to have to do, and it wasn't something that council directed us to do. You know, by the time we get to the May 31st deadline that I'll talk about in a moment, we'll know how many Glendale Register nominations have been processed through HPC up to that point, and that's when we'll determine how many of the contributing properties we'd be considering. And I hear what you're saying. I don't know that there's a huge downside to that, but it's just not the way that we've looked at this. I also, you know, it just throws. I can't address it exactly. So if that's ultimately council's or the commission's recommendation, we could take that to council for discussion.
And just so I'm clear, Kathy, because it did cut out a little bit, you're wondering if there needs to be an actual breakdown on how many contributor Mills Act contracts we issue every year versus how many Glendale Register ones. Is that the question?
That's not what I heard.
Okay, so that's good. I'm glad I'm asking.
My question was about the timeline. Maybe we should have all applications due at a set date. Because, like, for example, this year, the HPC has dealt with, I mean, of course, this is a very anomalous year, but we haven't received any applications for the Glendale Register and Mills Act. We've processed none. What happens if we get 6 at the tail end of the year? And then we've got, and then before we know that, we're sort of making decisions about Mills Act contracts for historic district contributors when we're supposed to be limited to only 2. It just seems that given that there's a soft quota, it may make sense to consider them all together.
If I've kind of made my thoughts a little more clear to myself, at least based on this. We have a backlog of nominations right now that predate the shutdown, going back to just when, you know, we had a staff intern who was able to kind of keep the Glendale Register program moving pretty well through a couple of years, and that person's no longer with us and we haven't had a replacement. So with the backlog, we have more than 4 potential nominations, including one nomination that the commission wasn't so sure about and needed further research that we haven't been able to kind of get from the property owner, but we've had a few calls back and forth. So I would say certainly for the first year, we wouldn't want to have a cutoff, because I think we owe it to the current applicants to service those nominations. I'm hopeful that by the end of 2021, all of those nominations will be through the process, and then we could reconsider toward the end of the year whether we want to move the Glendale Register onto a similar cycle. And that would also give us some time to think it through, basically, to see if there are any unforeseen issues that could arise. But we'll definitely bring that, if that gets traction with your colleagues, we can bring that forward to council as a recommendation from the commission.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Kathy.
So, sorry, I have a quick question too, just for clarification. If you say we have a lot in several properties in the pipeline right now,
Yeah.
and we're limiting the applications, I see, those won't be part of the quota. So we could potentially get 6 more in 2021 and deal with the properties or applications that are in the pipeline?
You know, this quota soft cap on the number is going to have to be something that we're a little flexible with for the foreseeable future. So we owe it to the current Glendale Register applicants to move them forward as best we can. I'm already telling people that they're not going to get processed in 2020, but very likely starting in 2021, we'll be seeing those nominations coming forward. And we'll have to play it by ear, I think, for the first year of this program at least, to account for the situation we're in right now, plus the new kind of concept. We certainly have at least 4 Glendale Register nominations that are complete and seem likely to make it through the process. We'll try to get those heard in the first half of the year, and when I go through the timeline, you'll see that we do have several months to get those at least through HPC, if not through City Council. And you know, by the time the middle of 2021 comes along, hopefully we'll have a better idea of where we are numbers-wise. And right now we can presume that we're going to have at least 2 contributors, assuming we get interest in the properties, but it's also a competitive process. So we could have nominations that ultimately aren't determined to be worthy by either HPC or by council, and then hopefully we'll have a list that we can go through to kind of weed out the best candidates from the lesser candidates. Great. All right, this slide.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up on something that Mr. Platt said. Are you saying that Glendale will process 0 Glendale Register nominations in 2020?
It is impossible for me to imagine that any of the current nominations will be processed go through the HPC approval process and the City Council approval process in 2020. So 2020 is going to be chalked up as a year where we likely have 1 Glendale Register designation, Nibley Park.
And is that because of site visit?
It's because of time. I don't believe we're going to be having a September hearing. We will have an October hearing for HPC. We usually consolidate our November and December hearings for HPC. And so, and there, just knowing what the workload is and what my time and my colleagues' time is, I'd say it's extremely unlikely that we'll get those processed and designated officially by the end of the year.
And I'm sorry, they're all from 2019 or earlier, or are they from this year as well?
It would be a mixture. We have 2 recent nominations came in that were incomplete. I have yet to even tell those property owners what's incomplete about the nominations. I think I have 1 or 2 more that may have come in this year, and some are from 2019, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Thanks, Jay.
The timeline that we're proposing right now for contributing property Mills Acts, and then we'll address the Glendale Register Mills Acts and the Glendale Register nominations with council if HPC wants to take that there. We're looking at breaking the year into a few discrete segments, and this is again very similar to what other cities do with their Mills Act programs. And I should remind the commission, one of the reasons that Glendale is different from other cities is because we treat our Glendale Register property Mills Acts very differently than other cities do. Other cities have a very rigorous program to review both their local designations, their individual designations, as well as their district designations. And that's part of the reason why I see this as kind of a two-pronged process with kind of a separate timeline and a separate process. Of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Other cities hold their Glendale Register, they're in Los Angeles, their historic cultural monuments or whatever they call their individual properties. They hold those to a much higher expectation of materials from homeowners and commitment from homeowners than we do for our Glendale Register properties. And that's been the case, as far as I know, since we've had Mills Act contracts in Glendale. So that would be a very different issue if we ever wanted to raise the bar on how we review those Mills Act applications. For now, the recommendation is to take the first 5 months of the year as a period where Mills Act applications can be submitted, and all the submittal materials will be submitted with the application. Staff will do a preliminary review to determine if the application is complete. This will be similar to what we do for our design review properties. We'll have a checklist. Applicants will submit the checklist with their nomination. We'll review and make sure that we concur with them that they're as complete as they think they are, which is not always the case. Once an application is complete, we're going to sit on it, hold it, I should say. If there's time, staff will begin property inspections during those first 5 months. But I'm building in some room that some of those inspections, if not all of them, could come after the May 31st deadline. Starting in June and July, we would do a complete review and analysis of all the applications. We would complete all of the property inspections. We will work with our building and safety staff to verify the accuracy of each application is going to have a work plan with an estimated cost of the work, line by line, item by item. This is similar to when we receive building applications, which are often based on the valuation of the work. We have staff in building and safety who look at that and say, wait a second, they're saying that their foundation bolting is going to cost $100,000. That's not right. So we're going to kind of get a rough review of expenditures to make sure that they're in the ballpark of what's real. Then staff will begin to review the plans and assign work plan points that I'm going to get to in a minute. We're going to determine the expense to tax reduction ratio for each property, and then we're going to calculate a final score. And that's how we're going to rank the applications when they come to you, with the highest score being best and lower scores being less recommended. At this point, we'll also have a sense of how many Glendale Register nominations have been through the process and how many Mills Act contributor applications we can look at for that calendar year. In July, September, with a little overlap, obviously these are inexact dates. The only exact date is we want to have a final submission date. And what we'll probably, I just put May 31st because it's the end of the month. What we'll look at is the calendar to make sure that it's a Friday or whatever day. That will change year to year, so that we can just let people know upfront exactly when we have to have their application. One thing I didn't mention is if someone files an incomplete application and say it comes in February, we'll give them feedback on that, and they'll have the opportunity to make it a complete application. As long as the complete application comes in by May 31st, that will be acceptable. So starting in end of summer into September, or July into September, we'll bring a list of these applications, the applications themselves, and the recommended number of contracts for HPC hearing. HPC's vote will be advisory to City Council, just like it is for other Mills Act contracts. One thing I haven't considered, staff is going to do an inspection of each of these properties. Currently, the commission visits properties and reviews Mills Acts and often makes suggestions about additional work items that could be on there. I'm not sure how that would work because that could kind of mess up our point system, so we'll have to think about that, or perhaps give commissioners an opportunity to visit sites earlier in the schedule. I'm actively thinking about this now for the first time, so let me know if you have any thoughts. Also in July and September, City Council will review the applications and the HPC recommendation and vote on which properties it would like to issue contracts for. And then we leave the last 3 months of the year to prepare the contracts, get them signed by the owners and the city manager, and recorded by the county. And you can see from these timelines that there's room for overlap. There's a little room for things, you know, if we went to City Council in October, we would still have plenty of time to get contracts written and recorded with the county by the end of the year. All contracts have to be recorded by December 31st. So that's it for the timeline.
Okay, that's very thorough.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
it's actually exciting to see that there's a process that we can
Figure we
identify.
need something like this
It's
for
great.
this new program.
Do we have any other questions before I open for
No,
public
no,
comment?
no. Oh, Chris,
Oh, there's still more.
you're really jumping the gun here.
Oh, I thought you made it sound like you were done. Sorry.
No, I'm just
Before we
done
change
with
the
that. I was
slide,
just happy to be done with that slide.
any questions about the timeline slide before we move on?
I just want to make a quick comment first, Jay. I want to thank you because this has obviously taken a lot of work and been very thoroughly thought out. At this juncture, I'll say that I would support visits by commissioners to the properties, and then I'll just, I think you said you will come back with a draft point system come back to HTC at some point before implementation, so I don't know if that's still happening, but I would guess if it's objective, we probably wouldn't make too many tweaks to what staff has already determined.
Yeah, we'll definitely be bringing the point scoring system back. That probably would be next year, not immediately, but during that early period before you're actually going to be implementing it. And I've already got a note that you are supportive of visits by the commissioners, and I've got a note about Commissioner Yurka's comment about the Glendale Register timeline
Yes.
being overlapping with this timeline.
Any other
I
questions
think
about this
that make
slide?
it easier for staff as well. That sounds very reasonable to me, but Jay, you would know.
In 2022, talk to me. It sounds very reasonable for 2022. For next year, I think we're going to have some issues. So,
Yeah.
but we can look ahead to that. We're a forward-thinking group of preservationists. So,
Okay, any more questions about the annual timeline slide before we move on to the other slides?
Looks good.
Okay,
all right, I'll go
Thank you,
through
Jack.
this quickly. I know this is getting
it's okay. It's
Long.
important.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
We're going to create a new, different application form for district contributors because it's going to ask for different information and require different things from the owners. As with our current applications, we need a grant deed and the property's legal description. That establishes that the person who's asking for the Mills Act contract actually owns the property, and we know what the legal boundaries of the property are. This is something we currently do. We're going to ask for a tax bill or documentation of the purchase price if they don't have a tax bill yet, and we use that for two reasons. One is to establish that it meets the valuation cap, and one I'll get to in a minute when we talk about the expense to tax reduction ratio. The next three items are reflective of ideas that the Commission has proposed for Glendale Register Mills Act properties in the past, but haven't been implemented, partly because we didn't know how to make those retroactive, or if we could just have them for current Glendale Register Mills Acts rather than existing ones. This predates most of the current commission, but I believe Lorna and Mike were on the commission when we talked about this. The state is now requiring that cities inspect their Mills Act properties on a 5-year cycle.
Right.
Very few cities around the state have ever done that. They used to require that properties be inspected on a 1-year cycle. I don't know of any city that ever did that. Some cities actually hire out to consultants to do this kind of work. A couple of years ago, we took photographs of the exteriors of every Mills Act property and compared them to the initial documentation. We didn't see any issues, but we did not go onto the properties the way we should have. This was kind of a quick way to just do a checkup, but not as good as it could have been. When we discussed this with the commission, I recommended that we put the burden for inspection on the owners more than on the city. And the owners are receiving a very nice tax break over many years.
They are.
As you know, the Mills Act contract is a 10-year contract that's renewed annually. So in effect, it's a perpetual contract. The tax reduction goes on throughout the duration of the contract. Over many years, it does get reduced in terms of the amount of the tax reduction. But it's always, for a long period of time, it's a good amount of money. So in terms of shifting the burden, we thought if we had photographs documenting the entire property, so a very good set of initial baseline photographs that come in with the nomination, and they're tied to a photo key, and then on a 5-year cycle, the owners themselves will have to re-photograph from those various vantage points to show us the entirety of the property. Then staff, rather than having to go out and visit each property and make appointments and arrangements, can review the photographs. If anything looks a little off, then we would go out and look more closely. If everything looks okay, we'd say they passed that visual inspection. In addition to the visual inspection, the commission had recommended that we ask that property owners conduct building inspection reports. That's similar to the report that homeowner or home buyers do during the transaction when they're purchasing a new home. There's a group of people who are certified to be home inspectors, and so we're recommending that for the Mills Act application for contributors, that the certified home inspector report be part of that application on the submittal checklist, and then again, every 5 years that reinspection occur. Same thing with the termite report. Initial termite report with submittal, on a 5-year cycle, resubmitted. Then finally, we are going to ask the applicants to tell us what they need to do with their house. And this is the meat of what we're really looking at here. And this is the basis for how we're going to determine which properties are more worthy or less worthy of getting the Mills Act tax reduction. The idea is that we're going to look at work, and this is where the point system is going to come in, and I haven't fully developed the point system. I have some ideas that we can share, and then we'll talk about it more formally later on. But the idea is that certain kinds of work will be receiving a certain number of points. Work that is restorative in nature, and just to remind the commission and anyone who's listening, to be a contributor in a historic district doesn't mean you're in pristine condition. What a contributor is a property that was built during the historic district's period of significance, which is often from the 1920s up into the 1950s or even 60s. So if it was built within that period and it hasn't been dramatically altered over the years, we'll call it a contributor. So I say dramatically altered because you can have alterations, and you can have alterations visible from the street and be a contributor. You could have all of the original windows in a house removed, for example, and still be a contributor. You can have issues with cladding. You can have certain features having been removed over time that we know were there and still be a contributor. So the idea is some work will be restorative. We'll be bringing these houses back closer to what they looked like originally. We'll be putting in new wood windows. We'll be taking off bad stucco treatments that were added later and bringing back something appropriate to the style and the period of the house. So we have the restorative work, and then we also have work that we can look at as kind of either structural or systemic work. Structural work would be if there were a sagging ridge beam, houses that may not have foundation bolting or have other foundation issues. In terms of systems work, we would have properties that have, say, old knob and tube wiring, which is actually a hazard, or perhaps old galvanized pipe systems that are beginning to fail that would need to be replaced. The idea with these kinds of repairs is that if those things do go bad, it can be disastrous. If we have a wiring problem, we could have a fire. If we have a plumbing problem, we could have significant damage to a property that we're trying to protect. So, so the idea is that we look at work and assign a certain number of points. If someone says, hey, I need to replace one vinyl window that someone put on the back of my house, that's going to get less points than someone who says, oh, I've got 6 windows on the front of my house that were replaced and I want to put new wood windows in. And I keep going back to new wood windows. In a historic district, we allow non-wood replacement windows for if we have wood windows that have deteriorated or when owners choose to replace them. Because we're going to be looking at these properties at the same level we would with the Glendale Register, we are going to take it to the highest level because we're giving people the Mills Act contract. So we're not going to say, or I don't think we should say, it's okay to put a fiberglass window in and get the Mills Act. To me, those are exclusive, where in our historic district guidelines, we allow fiberglass replacement windows even if they're visible from the street. The other issue with work plans is that, and this was something I struggled with trying to figure out, well, when we're trying to be fair, if someone puts in their work plan that they're going to repaint their house, but the current condition of the paint is fine and they're just anticipating, yeah, in the future, sure, I'm going to need to repaint my house. Or yeah, at some point my roof is going to fail, so I'm going to need to put a new roof on it. I didn't think that it was fair to include that kind of work in the work plan for the Mills Act, because every single property owner is burdened by that same issue. At some point, you're going to have to replace your roof. At some point, you're going to have to paint your house. And that's true not just for historic district property owners, but also anyone owning property anywhere in the city. So that sort of cyclical work that's common to all properties, I'm recommending that we not include unless in its current condition it's severely deteriorated. If someone buys a new house that has been in the same ownership for 40 years without any maintenance over a long period of time, and it needs paint and it needs a new roof and it's got all of this right in your face, and we know that at the end of this work process, this house is going to be a benefit to the city. We're going to see it from the street. We're going to know that there's a public benefit to giving the Mills Act contract that helped allow this work to be done. In that case, I think we should allow that sort of work. So this would be part of the staff review process. And then when the HPC and City Council reviews the staff recommendation, that will be outlined why certain points were awarded or not awarded. And ultimately, that will also provide a check and balance in terms of the city agent, the HPC and City Council kind of looking at staff's assessments, and it will also give property owners in the public hearing opportunity to testify in terms of why they think that they should qualify for certain types of work. So hopefully through that public process, we'll make this as fair and equitable as possible to make sure we're giving contracts to the properties that need it most and to the properties that will get some public benefit from. The last item on the work plan is that ultimately we do have to hold people accountable for having done this work. So we're going to ask that paid receipts and photographs of the completed work be submitted annually. The question that for me is still a bit of an open question, in the staff report I left it open as a five-year cycle or a 10-year cycle. I would personally recommend a 5-year cycle because that or a 5-year period for this work to be done, which is in keeping with what most Glendale Register work that the commission asks for is done within 1 to 5 years. Extending this over a 10-year period, which some other cities do, ultimately just feels like there's a lot more record keeping. It adds complication, and I think if we can compress the work plan to 5 years, that would be ideal. We could build in time where the commission could allow different periods of time for the work to be completed, depending on the extent. There may be projects where it needs one piece of work, but it's a really expensive piece of work, so it gets higher points because of that. But then there would be another project that has many different lower point projects that are going to be spread out over time. So ultimately, those kinds of issues will be weighed by both staff and HPC. Okay. Finally.
Last one.
Finally.
Goodness.
Jeeps.
Sorry, Jay, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Of course.
Sorry, when you're contemplating the 5-year cycle, was that a 5-year cycle? I'm sorry, was that for providing documentation?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used the word cycle, a 5-year completion period. If people are giving us a work plan, we have an option to say, tell us the work that you commit to doing under this contract in 5 years, but we could also look at it in 10 years or some other number. It's kind of random ultimately. But we do have to, I believe we should have a cutoff period, so it's not just like, you know, it'll be more rigorous, I think, than the Glendale Register for most Glendale Register properties, but it's also showing that in the initial years of the Mills Act contract, the money that the homeowner is receiving is likely to be being spent on these repairs to bring the house closer to its original appearance or safer or in more sound condition. What this also might do is discourage flippers. You know, we're not immune to even people nominating properties to the Glendale Register when they know they're going to turn it around and sell it soon after. So this would discourage that kind of activity.
Yeah, thank you. No, I could definitely support 5 years, and as we've already seen, compliance has been a difficult thing for staff to manage. We will be seeing one of those projects later today, and then our earlier agenda items that got moved to the next meeting might be examples.
Spoiler alert, I have good news.
Good.
Sorry.
Spoiler alert, he has good news, he said.
Oh, okay. And then I just have a couple more quick questions on this slide. Do we have is there a cost for this application? Is there a fee for this application?
Some cities do, well, for the Glendale Register, we do have a fee for the Glendale Register application. And I believe that we would have a fee, and I didn't actually include that, but we could establish a fee similar to what council has for all Mills Act contracts, which is on a sliding scale based on the valuation, which means I think 2 out of the 4 current gradations would count and 2 wouldn't. What some cities do is they have an initial Mills Act application fee, and then if you're granted the application, you pay the higher fee that covers you. And some cities even have an annual Mills Act inspection fee. Those are the cities that I believe hire a consultant to do the inspections. At this point, I don't recommend that. I think putting the burden on the owners is the way to go. But in terms of a fee, we are expecting upfront from these property owners a termite report and a building inspection report, which will be $500 to $600, $700. I don't have those exact numbers, but you guys may even be familiar with that. So there is a cost commitment that any applicant is going to have to make just to enter the process to be considered for the Mills Act. So in a way, we can look at that as possibly the initial fee, and then staff time will be accommodated with the standard Mills Act fee once the contract is ready to be okayed or signed.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess the reason I was asking is because I was actually contemplating that if there is a fee for the application, and then if we are asking for the building inspection and the termite inspections up front, and others may know better than me, but I think termite inspections can be costly.
They're about $100 to $125. Termite inspections are not that costly. A general home inspection is going to be between $300 and $500, depending on the size of the house. Termite inspections don't generally go up in cost depending on the size of the house, but a general home inspection will oftentimes have a graduated scale based on the size of the house.
Okay, great. I actually thought it was much higher than that. I thought it was going to be over, $1,000 or $1,200 combined.
No, it shouldn't be that much.
Okay. And I was just, thank you. That's helpful because I was just wondering if that might provide a bit of a deterrent for people to have to put up that kind of money and then potentially not be, not be granted the mills tax. So I think for a few $100s, we're okay.
I do think because those two inspections are looking at things that we can't see from our site visits, I'm not going to notice, whether the foundation is bolted or if they have galvanized leaking pipes or anything like that. So I think it's beneficial for us because then we can have any work that's identified as needed during those reports put into the work plan and taken care of. And then that would then be monitored on that 5-year reinspection cycle.
Well, I think what you're thinking is that you want to know what the upfront costs are, right, to be able to do the cost tax benefit. Otherwise, I was thinking if somebody were given, were awarded the Mills Act, they could do it afterwards, and those could be the first 2 items on the work plan. But I think you probably want to factor it into the tax benefit cost ratio.
You'll see how I'm doing that. I think it's more, in a way, yes, indirectly, because that will identify things that may add to the expenditure during the Mills Act contract period, so.
Okay.
All right, so now.
Actually, Commissioner Yurka, did you have a question? Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I can't see anyone but myself, unfortunately,
Yes.
on my screen. So it's
trying
a
to moderate
nightmare
for you.
over here.
Yeah.
But, so yeah. If you have
yes,
questions,
ready
make
for the
it
next
clear.
slide.
Yeah. Okay, finally, the staff review and analysis. How are we going to try to make this fair and equitable? How are we going to try to make this objective? We're going to do it through this proposed system. First, we look at the application and the site visit. During the site visit, just as when the commissioners make site visits, and in this case, the commissioners may add things to a work plan that could change the point scoring system in real time during a hearing. But the idea is that we'll see if the property owners have missed anything when they are presenting the work that needs to be done on their property. Someone may not recognize that there's a feature missing that one of our eyes would catch that they wouldn't necessarily catch. So certainly the staff inspection will hopefully do that, and then any HPC inspection would add to that. So once that's all done and we begin, the applications are all in, May 31st has passed, we start the scoring program. So the point-based scoring system, as I mentioned, is going to be based on the work that's needed, the unique needs of the property rather than those cyclical, everybody's got to do it kind of needs, and then also looking to see what the public benefit is. And public benefit in general is going to mean what do we see from the street. So, but we can also say, well, a house that's bolted to its foundation is a public benefit because it's not going to come down in an earthquake. A house that has a safe wiring system is a public benefit because we're not going to have a horrible fire. So, so in the point system, we'll take those kinds of things into account. I've already mentioned the types of work just very broadly, or examples that could be considered to be either restorative or dealing with structural or systemic issues. And then the scoring system, so there'll be points tied to the work plan. I don't know what that will be. You get 10 points, you get 20 points. So there'll be a certain number of points based on the work items and with some differentials. And then we're going to look at the expense to tax reduction. Oh, I wrote ration, but I meant ratio. This is how we're going to develop a multiplier that we use in conjunction with the work plan points. So I put this example together just with a basic idea of $1 million property. $1 million property at a 1% tax rate, which is the California standard tax rate, is $10,000 in taxes a year. And here we don't know what someone's ultimate tax reduction is going to be. It could be 48%, it could be 75%. It's different from property to property. So to create kind of an objective system for all of the properties that we're looking at, I just thought it would be fair to go to the low end of what a single family property owner receives through the Mills Act, which is a 50% tax reduction. I think the median, I can't remember if it was the average or the median, is about 54% for our current applications. So 50% is roughly where we are on that. So we take 50% of the annual tax, that's $5,000. I use the example of a 10-year work program here. If we decide to go to a 5-year work program, it would change, obviously. But tax savings over 10 years is $50,000 in savings to the property owner through the Mills Act, which is great. We then will take that number and look at the expenditure that is proposed for each work plan, and that's going to vary from application to application. So I put 3 rough examples, $25,000 to $75,000 as expenditures, and then since we're looking, just for the sake of making this clear, looking at the tax savings of $50,000 for this $1 million house, and then develop a ratio, expenditures divided by tax savings. The lower expenditure becomes a ratio of 0.5, 50,000 in expenses becomes a 1.0 ratio to tax savings, and then 1.5 for the $75,000 example. And then just so we can level the playing field, we're looking at, let's assume every property has 15 points that we're looking at here. And so you can see where the ratios take us, where we have 7.5 points for the lower expenditure, 22.5 points for the higher expenditure. Obviously, as we're looking at a group of properties, those work plan points and expenditures are going to be different, but I think this is a pretty fair way to kind of establish a numerical value that we can then combine with your assessments of the property's needs and kind of looking at the public benefit aspect, which hopefully won't be too subjective as possible, and come to a conclusion that there's a certain property that's more worthy of a Mills Act contract than another property. And that's, I believe, the goal that council left us with. This is different. This is our creation. This isn't taken from another city, so this is us kind of working our own plan, but it's informed by problems that some other cities have. And I can tell you that the longer we, as Commissioner Vartanian mentioned, 5 years may be better than 10 years because staying on top of people can be difficult. And so that is all I have for you on this. I assume that's enough. So
It is very thorough, very plenty. Anybody else have any questions, or anybody have any questions on this last slide?
No, thank you again, Jay. This is so much work. I guess just as I'm thinking through, to go back to the property inspection, so if somebody came in and they wanted to change out, they wanted to replace all of their vinyl windows, 30 of them with wood, and then they have to do the home inspection and the termite inspection, and the reports come back with a lot of issues. Those obviously need to be taken care of as part of the work plan, and then costs for the project increase. It's basically what would happen.
Well, I think, Jay, that's why you want all that information up front, right?
yeah, obviously they're not doing any work except for the 2 inspections before we look at this. But if that house needs all of that work, and ultimately this is an owner's choice, they are asking us to give them a contract, and we're asking them to commit to a certain level of work. If at the end of the day they come back and say, listen, this is going to cost me $150,000, and I'm not sure that all of this work needs to happen right away, what do you think? The commission and council will have discretion to hear from the owner and make decisions based on their real life scenarios.
And that's during the approval process, not after.
Yeah, that's during the approval process before we sign any contracts. So I think the system...
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just trying to think it through. And again, it's definitely a benefit to the owners. I guess it would just depend on how the numbers fall at that point and what makes sense.
Yeah, I would just think that, it's unfortunate that council, when we went to council back in 2016, the proposal was to include non-contributors for the Mills Act, with the idea being that some non-contributors can be brought back to contributing status, and that can be a pretty expensive chunk of work that needs to be done. The council wasn't interested in that. And both staff and the Historical Society were supportive, but council wasn't ready for that. But I do think in the case of a property that's been owned by a family for decades, that's had deferred maintenance over a long period of time, a new owner comes in knowing that they're going to be spending a fair amount of money on it, they may be a better candidate for the Mills Act than someone who comes in and says, I've got 3 windows that were replaced and I'd like to change those out. So I think this is how it's going to play out over time. You'll be analyzing these different applications and assessing, whose needs are greatest and whose property. We're not asking people to talk about their financial wherewithal.
Yeah.
Some cities actually do that, and I was like, I do not want to be involved in that at all. I don't think we should be involved in that. That's also airing everything out in public. So I think keeping that out of it, but knowing what potential expenses are involved is really important.
So commissioners, really quickly, we do have two calls from the public. So I do want to restrict our discussion to simply questions about the slides. Does anyone have any other questions for clarity before we open the public hearing, and then after that we can have some discussion?
I think it's very clear.
Okay. Any other questions? Catherine, you're good? Everybody, Nick, you're good? Okay. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. We do have 2 callers. Our first caller, one moment, is Andrew Allison. Andrew, you're on with us. How are you? Thank you for waiting.
Yes, good evening. Am I on right now?
You are, sir. Can you do us a favor
Very
and
good.
state
Thank
your
you.
name for the record?
Yes, Andrew Allison here. Good evening, HPC members. I'm a licensed architect here in Glendale and an officer of the Glendale Historical Society. My property in South Glendale, the Paterka House, is a designated local landmark and holds the Mills Act contract. I'm extremely pleased to see that the City of Glendale extended Mills Act benefits to include the Historic District contributors, and we in the Glendale Historical Society are looking forward to assisting and publicizing this opportunity for Glendale property owners. It was somewhat surprising, however, to see the proposed process become more onerous and stringent for less significant properties to receive Mills Act property tax reductions. In California, the information that I have shows that no other known Mills Act programs have different processes for district contributors. As indicated, this proposed process would require that a home inspection report and a termite report be provided, which doesn't seem particularly relevant to information for the Mills Act reviewers. Qualified staff should exercise their professional judgment in making recommendations to the HBC and Council. Only 2 in more than 75 programs in California have any requirement for termite reports in their applications. Home inspections are usually part of a real estate transaction to provide buyers with objective, independent, and impartial information regarding the condition of the systems and components of the property that may be defective or require immediate attention. The city is not purchasing or even investing in these potential Mills Act properties. Part of the reason for performing these visual inspections is to identify elements that would affect the value or marketability of a property, and typically identify a variety of issues that would not be germane to property tax reduction contracts. There are no specific components of a typical home inspection that pertain to performing maintenance in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. General maintenance tasks recommended in these reports have no specific applicability to historic district contributors. Likewise, termite reports are discretionary components of residential real estate transactions, not Mills Act contracts. In California, they expire after 180 days and are used merely to identify the presence or expected existence of wood-destroying pests. Termite reports follow rote formats where termites are found or may be present and provide recommendations regarding destroying them. They can contain recommendations for making consequent repairs that have no relation to the standards for rehabilitation. Extermination companies have no implicit understanding of historic properties and are not normally finished carpenters. Termite abatement and property repair or replacement of those features can be an element of a work program. It's questionable why these unrelated real estate transaction-related reports are proposed to be added to the application process, particularly when it would place further restrictions and costs on property owners of less historically significant properties. Thank you very much for your time and for considering my comments.
Thank you, Andrew.
If Andrew's still on the line, I hope you've submitted that in writing.
I didn't. I can do that.
I was furiously scribbling here, but I didn't catch it all. So was that a personal or a TGHS commentary?
This is personal.
Oh, I see. Okay, then I can't. If you could, that would be great, just so I can keep track of it. I
Sure.
could go back through the tape if I need to.
Sure, happy to do that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next caller. Our next caller is Francesca Smith. Francesca Smith, you're on. Can you please state your name for the record?
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Francesca Smith. I'm an architectural historian. Some of you may know me. I know you. I have a unique perspective. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You can continue.
Okay, I heard my
giggle.
own voice back again. I have a unique. Should I go?
Yes, you should.
There's a complete echo that's really loud. I'm the former MILSAC coordinator for the city of LA. I also served as staff in Pasadena to the MILSAC program, so I have a unique perspective. I think it's a little odd that it would be more stringent for less significant properties and more difficult for property owners of contributors than of individually designated properties. I asked about the program in 2018. I was told there was no difference in the applications. I made my application in April 2020, which also gives me a unique perspective. I'm going to skip ahead that 5-year plan is contrary to the purpose of the legislation. It's supposed to be 10 years. Mr. Platt's very, very, very complex system seems frankly needless to me. I have done this before and it doesn't take all of that. The fact that the point system was so complicated we couldn't explain it and hadn't really established it sort of underscores that. Also, his idea that staff would work with the county assessor, I have to say, is not true. I worked closely with the county assessor so I could understand the program when I was doing this, but the city does not have any input into what their answer is for a Mills Act contract. The timeline that was talked about beginning in 2021 is also curious since council adopted this in 2016. It normally takes until the following year after the application is made, and it sounds like in Glendale it will take a lot longer in order for this to be recorded and for tax benefit to kick in. So I think it's baseless that it wouldn't start until 2021 unless we really don't want to have Mills Act contracts for district contributors. There was little discussion of those additional requirements. I'm curious about the termite reports. I've worked with them a lot, and termite contractors are notoriously not qualified to make these judgments about things. It should be a historic preservation professional. I wanted to point out the idea that was floated about the design review being 360 degrees was also odd because pool additions to local landmarks and so forth are not subject to review as it is. So I don't understand why that would be more stringent. I think it's a public benefit for the community, not just a benefit for the owners. I'm not sure if there have been termite problems in Glendale with Mills Act properties. I've worked on quite a number. I've never seen such a thing be a problem. Most historic building owners are pretty careful stewards of their property. Applications need to be due by a date certain. It's usually in May or June in order to record by the next year. I think the city qualified staff should use their professional judgment. I've never seen such a thing as such a complicated system that no one would really understand. In Los Angeles, interiors are reviewed. There are yearly inspections. I performed these inspections, and I also performed the inspections at the beginning when people were applying. They usually took 15 to 30 minutes, so I don't understand where all that time would go. I chuckled at determining if applications are complete, since mine has been there for a quarter of a year now. Determining applications complete is a CEQA term that apparently is not applicable to this. Other cities, as Jay said, use consultants, and those inspections end up with a photographic record. They're not the great mystery that they sound like. Talking about the valuation of the work and the cost tax benefit was also curious in that on the application that the city of Glendale has now, which is notably from 2010, there is no place to list the proposed cost. So the expense cost tax benefit ratio is invidious. Staff can guess what the Mills Act benefit will be, but it's not established until the assessor performs their valuation, and it's done in a number of ways according to different properties. The talk about restorative work, systemic work, and structural work was curious to me. The point system not being established, I don't think should be adopted. I think this is really probably confusing to Historic Preservation Commission staff when it's all very complicated and sounds like absolutely nobody could really do it except one person behind a curtain. It's not that complicated. I have lots of friends who still are Mills Act managers, and they have a lot more properties than there were back when I was doing it, but it's not as complicated as it's made to seem. I think if there's a different fee, according to state law, it needs to be based on staff time budgeted and demonstrate that works. Again, I just wanted to mention that the Mills Act is a benefit to the city and to historic districts, which are the public benefit. It's not a handout of tax money, and it's not usually, I don't think flippers use it very often because it limits the market of who might purchase the property. I think those of you who are in real estate might be able to address that more closely.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Okay, that concludes our list of callers, so I will now close the public hearing and open it up for discussion among the commissioners. Who would like to go first? Anyone? Mike, your mic is on, so why don't you go first?
I don't have anything to, I thought that what Jay did was magnificent, to tell you the truth. So I'm not really sure how to approach Ms. Smith's concerns. I understand, and the gentleman before her, Mr. Andrew Allison,
Yes.
as to, how they like to get around it. They said, well, these things didn't work, but how are they going to, what do they want changed? How do they want it changed? That's my concern. So,
Catherine?
So I had a fair number of comments. The first is that I just want to be clear that the Glendale Historical Society has promoted the contracts for contributors. It did so immediately after the council decision, and it's done so intermittently ever since, including when the federal tax law was changed, which made which imposed a limit on the amount of state income tax and property tax, interest payments for a mortgage that you could deduct, and it seems to make the Mills Act sort of more beneficial. In the 4 years since this was approved, it sounds like we've had one applicant for the program. I don't think it's a good idea to make applying for a Mills Act contract for contributors more onerous than it already is, because we have not succeeded in getting people to apply. I don't think, and it does seem, I have to agree that it does seem strange to have a kind of higher standard or a greater degree of documentation for properties that are suggested are quite likely less historically significant than Glendale Register properties. So I have reservations about the inspection report and the termite report. I don't necessarily have a problem with a merit-based system, except that it does seem like it creates significantly more work for staff. I did find the point system. I could follow it. I found it to be confusing and non-user friendly. I think it is very unlikely to increase or to spur people who may be reluctant to apply. And I can't be enthusiastic about a program that would spend so much time ensuring that contributors to historic districts are really as dilapidated as owners claim, when it takes so long to have things like violations for unpermitted work in historic districts dealt with. And I have to say that the conversation that we've had at this hearing totally reinforced my sense that this is not a good use of staff time. We just heard that there's no time to bring forward any applications for Glendale Register properties this year. And yet there's going to be this very complex proposal put in place for Mills Act contributors, and when we don't even really have we don't really have a list of people clamoring to bring their properties forward. It seems to me a little bit of solution in search of a problem. I would argue that if we're going to have a merit-based proposal, which I think is fine, that it really needs to be simplified. There should not be any in-person inspections. They should submit detailed photographs documenting conditions at their property. I think it's fine to expect them to resubmit photographs at 5 or at 10-year intervals. They provide a detailed work plan and a timeline with their with their submission of photographs, permits, contractor invoices, whatever they have to prove that they have done the work. I don't think we need a point system. I don't think we need inspections beyond what would be required now by the state of California. I think it's fine to calculate the expense to tax ratio, but you don't need to make it a multiplier in order for that to have significance. And I don't think you need to assign points to everything that property owners want to do. We are a group of intelligent individuals. We can look at a work plan and get a sense of which is going to be the greater public benefit, which will have the most benefit to that property, which property owners are going to be spending the most money. So I just think that I know that Mr. Platt has spent a lot of time on this. I just think it's overly complex, and given one Mills Act contributor application in 4 years, it doesn't make sense to me to implement something that would make it less likely for people to move forward with applications. I also just want to say, as an addendum, that it sounds like Ms. Smith has applied for this program using the current Mills Act application. I think there needs to be some mechanism for dealing with her application. So I will leave it at that very lengthy speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Nick, do you have any comments?
No.
No? Okay. Lorna? Look, can you hear me, Lorna? Oh,
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute.
Okay.
So I don't know if we've come up with this system because we're trying to determine. I think the program has established sort of a baseline of 4 GR nominations and 2 contributors in historic districts as a goal, as a projected goal for each year. And so I don't know if that's really what's driving this process. I think I might agree that a 360 review, same as for GR properties, might be a little stringent for a district contributor. Not sure. I'd have to think more about in-person inspections. I guess if we're trying to have a level playing field, then I wouldn't be opposed to doing them for GR properties and for contributors. We do get work plans for our GR nominations currently. So I'm not sure what the suggested solution is then.
Okay. Any other comments, Lorna?
It sounds like we probably need to have a little more discussion, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jay, if you just go to council now with these comments and let them flesh it out.
Well, that's what I'm recommending. The council never asked specifically that HPC review this or that that it be brought back to them, but it is enough of a system with, I think there's some liability that the city and HPC need to acknowledge in terms of how we're going to choose properties for this program. And that's a large degree of why I made the system, which isn't nearly as complicated as I think some people are making it out to be. I appreciate the concern about the building inspection report and the termite report. Those two items came directly from HPC discussions a number of years ago, thinking in terms of the Glendale Register. Whether we do that or not is an open question for me. But I do think we have to look at historic district properties differently. And when several of the speakers and even commissioners have said that we're looking at Glendale Register, we're looking at district contributor properties as less historically meaningful than Glendale Register properties, to my mind, that means we should be extra careful in determining which properties get the contract versus others. When a property is nominated to the Glendale Register, we're already looking at it and we're analyzing it and we're saying, this is one of the key properties in the city. This property tells us about our heritage. This is a property that's worthy of protection. We're putting it at this high level of esteem because it's important to us. So those properties are being vetted very carefully on a case-by-case basis. And based on the number of inquiries that staff gets over a year, and then also with the properties that go to HPC that are found unworthy of designation, we certainly are a discriminating group, both at staff level and at commission level, in terms of whether a property should get on the Glendale Register and therefore be worthy of the Mills Act. So I would have to say that I'll take all commission and public comments to council. Because we've established that. Council didn't ask for this, and I did put in the staff report that we'd be going to them in October when we've already been asked to provide an update for historic districts. Based on our recent experience with the demolition deterrence ordinance, where we added some things to that we thought were important to consider, council wasn't ready to consider those. So we're going to do some groundwork before October to make sure that council is prepared and interested in hearing all of this about the Mills Act for contributors. As of now, we're still looking at October 13th. So yes, Commissioner Vartanian will be bringing your comments to the commission, but I just wanted to throw out from staff's perspective that, and we were directed by council to create a merit-based system, and I appreciate that in other cities things are done differently. Mrs. Smith got several things wrong in her comments about how things are done and what should be done in a certain way. And I won't address those unless anyone has questions. But this is Glendale's program, and we are going to develop a program that suits our city. The idea that this will create a huge burden on staff is not the case, because we inspect every Mills Act property that comes to us. The idea of getting a Mills Act application and not having an inspection, not understanding the property to be able to describe it and understand it before we enter into a contract with owners to give them thousands of dollars a year that we're not giving to similarly placed properties in the same exact neighborhood, even next door neighbors, to me is kind of absurd. I think we have to do a fairly high level of discrimination to make this a fair process. So I'll answer any other questions, but that's a long answer to your your question, Lauren.
And I'm sorry if I can just quickly, yeah, I actually, when this item came up, I was quite surprised to realize that it's been 4 years since we initially discussed this. It just seems like I just can't believe it's been 4 years.
Actually, HPC, I'm sorry, HPC never discussed this. This went straight to council and came to us from council. So HPC never discussed district contributors for the Mills Act. It was an
I'm sorry.
concept that went straight to council.
Maybe I spoke at a council meeting and I'm getting confused. But anyways, just the thought that 4 years have passed and time does pass quickly. So Jay, you did mention in the report that this program, and you did also acknowledge that it probably hasn't been, excuse me, very well publicized, that communication to residents would be via the city's website, GTV6, you know, partnerships with HOAs and the Glendale Historical Society. When would we expect that, you know, those types of communications and collaborations might begin?
I would hope this fall, if we get some level of consensus from HPC and bring our concepts to City Council in October. Certainly fall into early next year, you know, and I wrote in the staff report that on the city's end, the city did nothing to publicize this, and we weren't directed to, and we just don't have a lot of control over our city website in general. But what we could do is put notices up on the website. We could put notices on GTV6, possibly. I'd have to check on that. We are on the verge of having our historic district brochure ready to go. That will be distributed among historic district residents. One small part of that would include a discussion of the Mills Act for contributors. In addition to the city, I think the homeowners associations, which have extensive email lists, and the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council could start getting the word out. Kathy Yerka has told us that the Glendale Historical Society has gotten the word out. I wonder if we could, you know, just ramp that up a little bit, because obviously the only application we've received is from a board member, former board member of the Historical Society, and who's misrepresenting questions about what happened in 2018, but we don't have an application for a competitive merit-based system for the Glendale Register, and we are not going to be accepting the current application that we've received. We're going to take that application and transfer it into whatever process we end up determining starting January 1st until May 31st, and that will be considered along with any other applications. One issue that we did bring to council, and that's reiterated by the City of Long Beach, the City of Los Angeles, Mills Acts are not entitlements. They're something the city is giving to property owners. We're doing that for a reason, and I think when we have almost 800 and we're soon to have over 1,100 similarly situated contributing properties spread throughout different neighborhoods in the city, I think the public wants to know that we're being as fair as possible, just as when we have housing allowances and things like that, and we have a very elaborate lottery system. You know, possibly the fairest way to do the Mills Act for contributors would be to send out notices to every contributing property owner and say, you are number 1 and you're number 20, and we just go down the list to 1,100, and whoever bites first gets it, and then we take the next one. But that doesn't give us much benefit as a city. It doesn't give us much preservation benefit. So I do strongly think that having this competitive system is really critical to the system.
Kathy, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that when my objection to the difference in standards between how we treat contributors and Glendale Register properties is based on the fact that it seems very odd to me to take so many greater precautions to ensure the preservation of contributors versus the most historic properties in the city based on all of the documentation that we would be requiring of them that we don't require. But that just seems a little bit backwards.
Well, if I can address that, I think it's actually a similar level of documentation. A Glendale Register application on a Mills Act application contains a work plan that's considered by HPC, and then after the site visit, we apply conditions to those properties. We monitor the completion of that work, and we verify publicly that the work has been done according to their contract. We'll be doing something very similar with the Historic District contributors, but we're putting the added burden of someone submitting paperwork, submitting receipts for work paid, so that we can actually say, yes, we know that work's done. Theoretically, over time, we'll have a lot of these contributing properties, and we'll be compiling that paperwork and filing it away. But aside from the termite inspection and the building inspection, which to me we can talk about more if the commission doesn't want to recommend those. But I think the process is very similar otherwise, except for the point system and putting down the ultimate ranking system. Council asked us to do a ranked system based on merit. So we're basically following through on council's direction. Whether other cities do that just because they feel a certain way rather than they put an objective number next to it, that's fine. I'm recommending the objective number because I think it protects the city. So in the future, we will be able to say, here's why we chose to give these properties contracts. With the Glendale Register, we already are saying that. We've already vetted them. They're on the Glendale Register. We're giving them these contracts.
I do want to clarify that what I was talking about was the termite report and the building inspection.
Oh,
that's exactly
right. And
the issue.
Those ideas are both hangovers from previous commission discussion a number of years ago. Whether we do it or not, I see value in it, and I disagree with Francesca Smith about there not being Secretary of the Interior standards that we can apply to whether a house is termite ridden or not. If a house is termite ridden, it needs to be fixed. We can't see that from the outside. Let's do it. Whether Glendale has a termite problem or not, I don't know for sure. You don't see tents going up unless properties have transferred. So, those are things we can either not do on a longer timeline, something like that. Lorna?
Sorry, and to be frank with you, I had absolutely no idea that these inspections were something that people from the Glendale Historical Society were contemplating, and so I'm interested to hear that they were brought up. I was just asking because I too, when I was reading through the report initially, as I was asking earlier about costs and wondering if it might be a deterrent just based on costs, which I thought would be much higher and maybe in conjunction with the fee we already had in place. But I guess at some level, and we do not require these for GR properties. But as I mentioned earlier in thinking it through in my own head, if these help to determine the work plan and the point system, I probably could understand wanting to ask for those. In other words, if there are going to be huge issues with either that are going to increase costs that must become part of the work plan, then maybe it makes sense. To just pivot for a moment, Jay, I thought on our GR properties we did also, and I think staff probably hasn't had an opportunity because of understaffing, in my opinion. I thought we did have a scheduled review of every 5 years.
Yeah, that's built into the Mills contract.
Right. Okay. Do we ask for receipts for those, or what's our process with that?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, are we being more onerous with the contributors in terms of asking for actual receipts, or are we doing the same for the GR properties?
No, we're not. We don't ask for receipts from the GR properties, and some cities ask for receipts for all of their Mills Act contracts. Some don't. Thinking in terms of this process, that was something I pulled from what some other cities do, but not all. With our Glendale Register properties, we just look to verify that the work was done. We don't care. We don't ask them how much it is. We don't ask for an estimate of how much it is up front. Getting the estimated costs, I think, is important for the Mills Act properties in terms of the merit-based ranking system.
Right, I disagree with that, but I guess if we want to even out the plane a little bit, maybe if we don't ask for receipts for GR properties and we just do a follow-up inspection, be it an actual inspection or photograph submitted, maybe we don't ask for a different standard for contributors.
Yeah, that would be
I don't know
easy.
how my colleagues feel about that.
I have a few comments I'd like to make. With regard to inspections, I happen to think a general inspection and a termite inspection are wholly appropriate in a circumstance like this, and I think even with our GR nominated properties, that's something we should consider doing. There are lots of things that can go on under a house, inside a house, that we're not aware of. I see this every day in my line of work, and termite inspections they don't just look for termites, they look for dry rot, they look for all sorts of things. And there are lots of things that could happen in a house that aren't related to the things that we see when we do our visual inspection walking around the property. So the idea of having an inspection, those two inspections in particular, done ahead of time, I think is great. The thing I've noticed in my time here in reading some of the applications that we receive from homeowners, and the thing I've learned talking to them at site visits and whatnot, the vast majority of them don't understand much about this process at all. We get applications from them that their list of projects that they want to do are renovate the kitchen, redo the bathroom, and all of these great things that are totally not related to what we want them to do, what's related to the Mills Act contract itself. So any information we can give them up front, any way we can be participating in the process and make the process much more open and all-encompassing for them, I think would be helpful. That's number one, throughout their nomination process, throughout their approval process, and for their time in the home. I am also very much in support of this becoming a much more documented process between the city and the homeowners, because when the homeowner sells their home, they're passing on this whole experience to their buyer. And the vast majority of the buyers, in my experience, selling Mills Act property homes, don't know much about this process either. And I think it would be a huge benefit and a protection for the homeowner and a protection for the city if there was some kind of a file for each home that indicated exactly what was done and receipts to show that this was completed, and these were, we do have our list of conditions in the contract, and which is important, and that every buyer of a Mills Act property should see. But if there was some kind of a file, it would be amazing if it was uploaded to the property portal someday, that a homeowner or a potential homeowner or buyer rather of a Mills Act property can look at, because that, I can tell you, is one of the biggest obstacles one of the main things I have to focus on when I'm representing a Mills Act property as a listing agent representing the seller, is making sure that they're really disclosing everything possible to their new buyer, because this is a contract with the city that's very strict and is very costly if something goes wrong. And this is a partnership with the city, and I think it's in the city's best interest also to make this, I don't want to say cumbersome because I know staff's time is important, but as detailed as possible. One of the callers said that, when they were talking about the reports being done, they mentioned that, the city is not investing in this property. Why would they be doing a report like that? The city actually is investing in these properties. They're giving the city, I think the city gives up most of the tax revenue, doesn't it?
Actually, the county loses most of it. The city loses about 11 point something percent.
Okay, well, that's an investment.
GOSD also loses money.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, that is an investment in these properties, and it does behoove the city, if we're going to be partnering with these people, to make this process somewhat, you can look at it in the negative tone as cumbersome, or you could look at it in the positive tone as detailed and as thorough as possible. So I'm in support of doing inspections and things like that, because I think homeowners, I think it's great for us to walk around a property and say, we really want it to look pretty, but there's all sorts of other things that can happen in a property. And then, shoot, there was one other thing I wanted to say. Hopefully it'll come back to me. If there's anybody else that has any comments based on other things Jay had said. Oh, actually, I did want to ask, I'm sorry. You mentioned that you would address some of the inconsistencies in what Ms. Smith said. I'd be interested to hear what you think those were.
Oh, just...
You mentioned a couple already.
Yeah, just things like staff working with the assessor. If I said that, I shouldn't have. I either misspoke or it was misheard, because we don't work directly with the assessor on any Mills Act contracts except to submit them and check on their progress. She said that pools are not subject to review. Pools are subject to review on Glendale Register properties.
Unfortunately.
If we do look at 360 degrees on a contributor, the same thing would be true. The term completeness in terms of applications is completely appropriate to use. It is not merely a CEQA term. It is actually a Glendale term. We use it all the time for our design review applications, building applications, et cetera. She speaks of the current application. The current application is not the application that we can or will be using for Mills Act contributor properties, so it's a moot point. Those are just some of the jottings that I put a mark by. There may be other things in there, so.
Okay. I think I remember the other thing, thank you, Jay. The other thing I wanted to mention was the fact that we haven't had many applications for contributor Mills Act status. I guess what I want to say is I don't think the two things are at all connected. Whether we make the process a bit more challenging for those applicants or not, I don't think that there's a relation there. I think that the process, the number of applications we'll receive for Mills Act contracts for contributors will grow over time once the word of mouth has spread. I think when the Mills Act process contract or program really got into full swing in Glendale was decades ago. In fact, we reviewed as a commission the removal of a house from the historic register that was put on the register in the 1980s, and there was a gap of not very many after that. But it's gained traction over time through conversation and neighbors learning about the programs and the Historical Society talking about it. I think that once a few people get it, it will continue to move forward. I don't think we need to worry about the process of the application being a barrier to entry for people. The process will be what it is, and if people want to go through the process, they can. And when they hear that other people have done it, then it will slowly gain traction. 3 or 4 years may sound like a long time, but for something like this, I don't think it's very long, and we're not even talking about that many homes in general anyway. It's not like the whole city can participate in that program. There's a small group of homes that can participate in that program, and I think once it starts to happen and we get a few on there, I think it's the kind of program that will sort of take off on its own, and TGHS and things like that will help promote it.
But to that thought, the real estate community is really what drives most of our our Glendale Register nominations. Once members of that community are familiar with this program, I imagine that could be a big driver of.
Yeah, there's all sorts of opportunity for this program to become as big as the traditional Mills Act program, our GR program, which I don't know. I don't think it's been, we've had a lot of nominations in the last decade or so, but before that it was not a huge thing. It just took some time for it to enter people's awareness, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I think he is right. I think the real estate community probably has a big role to play in this, and if you think about it, both programs really do benefit new homeowners more than folks who have lived in their homes for many, many years. But Jay, do we have something to point to right now to start, if we wanted to point to something as HOAs or individuals or organizations and say, hey, this program exists, this is how it works? Do we have something?
Not right now. We will have, and this is all.
I think that's what this is about, right?
Yeah,
Part of this.
This is kind of what this is about. Council's given us direction. We're now implementing council's direction. We're trying to fine tune it to make sure that we're dealing with this in a way that's appropriate for the city. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So soon we will have a historic district brochure, which will have a very limited amount of information about this. Detailed information will be available when we actually have the application. We'll have to have the application available starting January 1st, 2021. We hopefully would have it earlier because there would be no reason to not allow. Some cities don't even accept applications within a certain deadline. To me, that's meaningless. We can accept them as long as we have a cutoff for when we stop looking at them and begin our processing. So, so we would have an application sometime in the next few months. Yeah, so something concrete until we have the brochure or the application, whichever comes first, that would be the place to go. But we can start talking to people about it, saying it's a program that's available, get people excited, tell them to keep checking in.
Okay.
So, right, considering that we don't really have anything concrete and that we're still fleshing this out right now, I'm not surprised that we haven't had any traction on the program over the past 4 years. I mean, to be frank, right? We really haven't had anything to, I guess. I don't know how the process would work if we don't have everything in place yet.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, go.
No, I just wanted to reiterate, and I don't know how my colleagues feel. One of the speakers did mention something about the full, and I might have already said this, about the sort of 360-degree review as we do for GR properties. Contributors in districts, we really only look at what's visible from the public right-of-way. So I think I might not be opposed to just leaving it at that for these contracts.
If I
Go ahead, yes, please.
I want to say that is actually one aspect that I don't have a problem with, is extending it to the 360-degree view in exchange for the Mills Act contract. That's an area where I think it's reasonable to hold the contributor with the Mills Act to a higher standard than the contributor without that contract.
Yeah.
So
I agree with
so
that.
I didn't have a problem with. I did want to say we are so understaffed in historic preservation, and whether you see it as an onerous process or a detailed process that's being proposed for these contributors,
Right.
that this is not where I want staff time to be going, is dealing with all of this paperwork, the receipt, the inspections, even just coming up with the point system. I want it to be on other things. The fact that it took 4 years for us to be having this conversation, or for this program to be coming, say, Jay's shaking his head, or the fact that we've been waiting for the historic district brochure for as long as I can remember, which is like 5 or 6 years. It's an understaffing problem, but I just don't see this system as the thing proposed as commensurate with the amount of staff time that we have for this process.
I mean, I certainly understand where you're coming from on that. Yes, I think we walk away from every meeting thinking Jay is overworked and understaffed on his team. That doesn't, to me, that's not a reason to make something easier or less, or give less weight to aspects of a process just because we don't have the staff to fulfill it. Maybe we need to, one of the comments we need to be sending to council after every meeting is, we really think we need more staff. We really think we need more staff. We really think we need more staff. You want a robust program, you need to hire more people. I mean, maybe that's the message we should be sending, not, you're doing the right thing, let's keep the numbers of staff down, and it's okay, we'll just adjust our programs accordingly.
We are looking to get another intern. We haven't started the search yet, but the
Timing
the need is here, the goal, the desire is
Timing
here.
seems rough considering everything that's going on.
Well,
but if you think
we're
you
not
can-
doing any new permanent staff positions,
Yeah.
but we could bring in people at an intern level who we treat as staff. They have actual titles
Good.
and it's a decent paying kind of internship.
Oh, good.
So
Oh, they get paid. That's even too. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. I mean, so that, to your point, Catherine, I understand where you're coming from, and I get that, yes, at some point we have to acknowledge that we have limitations, staff has limitations, but I don't know that we should necessarily compromise standards for the sake of that. I think we should be pushing for more staff rather than lowering our barrier to entry.
And I guess we should be fair, though. To be fair, though, the requirements should be the same across the board,
I agree
right?
with that. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah.
Let me just step in there.
I agree with that, too.
We can't go backwards and apply things to the Glendale Register right now, because that's not the direction we received from council. So we can move forward with the district contributor discussion and bring that as a future discussion item to council that can be brought forward by the public or members of the commission in the future. But the commission nor staff is able to just kind of throw that out there now, so.
I mean, maybe in this case, it gets tried out on the contributors, and if it seems like a system that's working great, then we can bring it up to council to move it on to the GRs.
I'm sorry, why can't we recommend that council do that if what all we're doing right now is making a recommendation? It's maybe a process question. I don't understand why we can't suggest that council.
You can suggest anything you like. We would have to bring it through the director and the city manager when we approach council. Council sets policy for the city, the boards and commissions do not. So we work toward the direction that council's given us. In this case, Mills adds 4 contributors.
Yeah.
And that's a long-standing direction that we've received at staff, at least, to kind of draw a certain line there, which doesn't mean that board members or commissioners can't contact their appointing council person, raise an issue at a city council hearing, any of those things. So there's obviously channels for that, but it can't be something in a staff report where we say, and the commission wants to change the Glendale Register program.
Right, because you're reacting to an actual direction from council. This whole thing you presented, you didn't just make this up. You did make it up, but you didn't just decide to do it. You didn't decide to do it on your own. Council actually said, we want you to create a program, or all of
Well,
it.
and we just can't open a different line of discussion, is what Jay is saying. There is a process, and we do have a bureaucratic process.
Unfortunately.
No, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's the bitter pill we need to swallow.
Okay, any other discussion on this item?
No, I think you summed it up very well, Chris.
Thanks.
I'm in complete agreement with what you have said so far. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, and this is a discussion item for the commission, so it doesn't require any kind of vote. But I wouldn't mind a straw poll on a couple of issues so that I can move forward when we go to council ultimately with what direction we're taking.
Let's do it.
And the main issue is the termite inspection / building inspection, whether at the initial application and/or on the 5-year cycle. And I can also go to the council and say the commission was split on this issue. So
Maybe we'll go one by one. Mike, what are your thoughts on the inspections at the time of application and/or at a periodic cycle throughout the life of the contract?
You know, that would be, it seems to me it should be at the beginning, the termite inspection, but, you know, if all the ducks are in the row, maybe after the 5th year would probably be best.
So you think at the beginning and then again later?
Well, I would love, I mean, yes, but, you know, you end up spending a lot of money for a lot of things that, how often do you have termite inspections? Only when you sell a house.
They say every 10 years kind of thing. And look, just as a point of discussion regarding termite infestations and is Glendale infested with termites, our homes are really old and they're mostly built with redwood, and the termites don't really like redwood. I very rarely come across properties that are riddled with termites, that are falling down from termites. Dry rot's a different story. Dry rot's an easy thing to have happen. It does require maintenance, but termites themselves, we very rarely run into issues where homes are just riddled with termites. So
Just at staff level, we do see it fairly often. I just got pictures of a wall in a historic district that was eaten away. It was the little pony wall on a courtyard, so it's a little more susceptible.
oh yeah, those.
But
yeah.
that thing was devastated, so.
Yeah, I have seen those. Yes, the exterior walls that have the stucco framing around. Yes, those I've seen like that. But the houses themselves are usually pretty durable. So Mike, that's your position. Okay, thank you, Mr. Doom. And again, we're talking about inspections at the beginning during the application process, and then perhaps cyclically later.
In my 20 years living in my house, I've had termites twice. And so I am in favor of termite inspections at the application process, and then a second review at the end of 10 years. So initially, and then a 10-year review, just for inspection. And that's not like you mentioned earlier, a couple $100 for an inspection, and it is well worth the investment.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Doom.
And my two
Oh, sorry,
cents
go ahead.
on earlier with Jay's report, I complimented his report. I had written down a number of questions, and the more I listened, he answered all my questions. So I
Great.
congratulate the staff on that very thorough report. Thank you.
Good job, Jay.
Right.
Commissioner Yurka, your thoughts on the inspections?
Oh, I'm not in favor of an inspection process for contributors that's different from Glendale Register.
Okay. Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes, I think I'm still trying to connect that dot as well. I'm also not certain why we would want to have that for contributors if we don't have it for individual register properties.
Can I just
Maybe
jump
I'm
in?
hung up. Someone can help me understand.
He's going to try now, I think.
Question.
And I think Lorna and Mike, you were both on the commission, but perhaps I'm wrong because it is a long time ago. But we did talk about expanding the, shifting some of the burden to Glendale Register property owners. We got into initial discussions with the city attorney about how to do that and whether it could be retroactive to existing contracts or only for future contracts. And to be honest, it kind of got bogged down and then just went away in terms of an active pursuit of that discussion. But the commission has expressed an interest in it in the past, and that's the only reason. I don't think I would have thought to bring this up right now, but it's something that was discussed several years ago. And so long story short, we might be able to bring that into the Glendale Register sphere if we were directed to do so. And then we would have to figure out whether it can be, and I can see ways to make it retroactive. We tell people we're going to cancel their contract unless they sign a new contract that does this. Canceling a contract isn't instantaneous. It's a 10-year process where it gradually diminishes over the course of 10 years. But that would be one way to do it that I can picture. So I hear your concern that we're doing it differently for both, but that's based on a direction we may move with Glendale Register properties in the future.
And Jay, I'm sorry, when we say shifting the burden, I mean, it's an existing burden for all homeowners. All homeowners need to do the termite inspection. So, I don't know, am I getting caught up in language here?
It's the 5-year cycle of inspections that's built into the Mills Act contract. That's the burden I'm referencing. Rather than staff having to go out or the city having to hire a consultant to do that work, we're trying to get the owners to do as much of that as possible. There'll still be staff time reviewing photographs and documents, whatever, but we wouldn't have to make appointments with all 78 or wherever we are now Mills Act contracts every 5 years.
I see. So when you say shifting, you mean instead of the city going out to see if there are termite issues or dry rot or whatever else might come up in a home inspection, and I didn't even realize we would do that. That requirement is on the owner as part of the contract cyclically.
Okay, so your thoughts on the inspections? You're still on the fence about it? Lorna?
Sorry?
You're on the fence still about the inspections then?
Yeah, well, I think I'm still kind of talking it through with Jay. Yes, I am a little on the fence about it.
Okay.
Maybe at the first 5-year cycle.
So not at the time of application, but later?
At the first 5-year cycle.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
But
Okay.
But not at the time
with
of
the
application.
I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
I'm in favor of doing them at the time of application, and I'm with kind of with Commissioner Doom on this one. I don't think it needs to be 5 years unless there's already a 5-year thing, and we can just tack that on. I think a 10-year for termite inspection is probably appropriate.
Okay. And Mr. Morgan, I wasn't sure. You said you would support the initial, and are you okay with the 10 years also?
Yeah, if it's initial, 10 years is good.
Okay.
Okay.
And does this apply to building inspections as well as termite inspections?
Oh, yeah. General home inspections as well? Nick is nodding his head yes.
Yes.
Michael, yes?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I think a termite inspection, right, I don't think we usually do those they're not recommended in less than 10-year cycles, so
Correct.
I'm okay with that. I don't want to make that a 5-year cycle when the standard is a 10-year cycle.
Yeah.
I don't think it's so onerous for the amount of money that Chris has said. Doesn't seem to be terribly, we're not imposing an undue burden on the people that want to get the mills out.
So we're just saying we want to make sure that as we give you this benefit and you're putting your property either on the register individually or as a contributor in the district, we just want to make sure you don't have other issues going on and your house is actually going to fall down in 5 years.
That's how I believe it to be.
I mean, is that what we're trying to achieve here? I guess I'm just stuck on what we're trying to achieve.
Well, I think that's something that we're trying to, perhaps it's something we're trying to achieve, and I think it's something that even the GR property should be going through. Now, I get that's a different conversation, but it seems to be, right now, the issue is that we're comparing the two. And I think that, go ahead,
I think
Lorna.
that's what I was saying is that we should be, right, that we should be, have the same requirements across the board. I'm not disagreeing, but right, as you were starting to say, we need to go back and that will need to be a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we...
GR properties.
Yeah, we can't have that conversation right now. That's not the conversation we're having. And I don't mind establishing a new, we kind of have an opportunity now because we're really starting to implement our Mills Act contracts for contributors program, which is what this is about. We really have an opportunity to create a better, more modern program. And rather than, it wouldn't be as easy to do this with the GR program as it stands now. We're at the beginning of a program now with the Mills Act for Contributors program. We have an opportunity to make it really modern and really take into account the issues that homeowners face that we've seen over the years that might be a little bit lackadaisical in the GR program, that might be a little bit too loose in the GR program. We have an opportunity now to kind of maybe clean some of that up, and then potentially down the road, if potentially down the road, we're able to learn from these new requirements that we've put on the contributor program, maybe we can implement those in the GR program later, fine. But at some point, the comparing back and forth, these are two different programs. We have to accept that. They're two different programs. And the GR program is probably not perfect. It's a very old program. And with some legacy things about it, we have an opportunity now to make a better program. And if it's only for one segment of it, then it's for one segment of it. There are a lot more contributors there are a lot more people, a lot more properties that can take advantage of the Mills Act for Contributors program than there are GR properties, I think, in the city. There will be ultimately. And so I think it's important that the program be very clear, and if it appears to be more challenging or more difficult than the GR program, well, then that's just a byproduct of the process. But there's the potential for a lot of properties to take advantage of this program, so it really should be very robust and clear, and I think a little more stringent, I think, than the GR program.
There's a potential for 2 properties a year to take advantage of it. Not a lot.
No, it's not a lot, but there's a lot more than, you know, and if we only get 2 properties a year, that opens up the opportunity for contributors, right? More contributors or no?
Yes, it does. And
Yeah.
if we have more staff time, which we're hopeful is going to happen, we will likely, you know, council knows that staff time's limited. We're trying to process things as best we can. If we have more hands and eyes doing it, we're going to be able to do things quicker and better. And so that number can change. I certainly don't want to impose a limit if we're able to go beyond it. That would be counterintuitive to everything that we try to do and that I want to do as a preservationist. So
I think there's a finite number of GR properties in the city, and within that group, there's a finite number of property owners that would want to be involved in the program anyway. There's going to be, by the time, you know, even if these next 3, he's talking about 1,100 potential contributors, it's a lot of homes. So
that's assuming 60% contributors. Usually we have 80 plus.
So yeah, so I mean, we're about to open up a whole new world to a lot of people that we don't think is a very popular program because we haven't had a lot of interest in it in the last few years. I think it's the kind of program that, I think it's the kind of program that's going to take off after a while. It just needs to get its legs. We're still discussing how to do it.
I feel dumb when I was writing this up and thinking it through. I've totally forgot that the real estate community can be a major driver of this. And if that's a sales point that people can use, I think they're going to use it. So.
There is, absolutely.
The real estate community would have to be, I think, more on board with advertising when properties are located in historic districts.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think the Historical Society should make a really strong effort of educating the real estate community on those types of things.
We have.
Did you say
I
we?
did the presentation myself for the Glendale Board of Real Estate.
Oh, good. And we need them. We need a lot of those presentations.
It's a different discussion, but yeah, I think we have some inherent issues with the real estate community, and not certainly not Chair Craig Noddy. But I think we do have some inherent issues with the real estate community and how properties are being presented, which are in historic districts. On a number of occasions when I've approached new owners myself, they have absolutely no idea what a historic district is, or that they've bought a home within the boundaries of a historic district, and that they have certain obligations. So I think overall, in terms of historic preservation, we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we do, and there needs to be, without belaboring this particular discussion too long, I think the city's information is pretty good online, but buyers are supposed to do their own investigations. We can point them to water, but we can't make them drink. And every property that sells that's within a historic district, I can promise you, somewhere in the listing it states that. It's in the disclosures from the sellers. It's there. Whether a buyer decides to try to learn more about it, there's not much we can do about that.
In every zone, every zoning designation, simple numbers and letters.
And it's a question on the disclosure form that the seller fills out. I mean, it's there. It's information, and not every real estate agent may understand it. But at some point, the buyer is supposed to do their own investigation on pretty much everything.
That's very true. And you and I have sat and looked through one of those notebooks together, and there are a couple of check boxes on a couple of pages.
Yeah.
Let's save this discussion for another day, and let's move forward.
Moving on. Okay.
Jay, so much for all of your work and for answering our questions.
Now, let me just, so I can go to council with some real information, because we have been a little all over the place. I have a sense of where the commission stands on the inspections. I haven't heard any strong objections to having an annual timeline with the rough schedule that's been presented. Council already saw an even rougher schedule. This is fleshed out a little bit from what they saw, but there was no issue at that point. In terms of submittals, I don't think all of the submittals are similar to what we ask for any Mills Act property, except for the photo key with the photographs, which we'll be asking for. The work plan is going to be a little more detailed than what we ask for from the for a Glendale Register property. It'll have more lines to fill out. Most importantly, the anticipated expense for each work project. But I didn't hear any controversy about having a more fleshed out work plan. And I pause, but nothing. I personally do think it's important for staff to make site visits to these properties. I know staff's time is limited. I don't see a way around it. I wouldn't recommend not doing it, but I did hear some dissent, so.
Really? Was there dissent on staff visiting?
Commissioner Yurka may have said it wasn't.
It was inspection. It was the mandatory inspection.
Well, this would be for the initial site visit at the time or sometime soon after application?
Oh, no, I think that's fine.
Oh, okay, I misheard then. Cool.
Yeah.
I did hear some concern that the point system hasn't been fleshed out. I have a version of it on paper that I just wasn't ready to debut for you guys. It's something, and it will have to be flexible. There will be unanticipated work items that we're not going to be able, that are so specific to a property, we won't be able to have it on our list. But the idea of the basic scoring system through some assessment of points for the proposed work, was there concern about that?
There isn't concern from me necessarily. I can understand council's desire to have something they can point to as an objective. This is a very subjective process. So if they're looking for something that they can point to that's objective, when someone calls them and says, why did this happen and not this happen?
Why was it your friend and not my
right.
friend?
I mean, I
So-
can understand their desire to protect themselves in that regard. So, you know, it sounds like you've really.
Do I hear anyone disagree with the basic concept of that, knowing that we'll try to work it out and you'll have a chance to look at that?
I actually was not in favor of it. I think this is a subjective process, and I have some concerns about it just being reduced to a numerical formula.
Okay, does anyone share that concern?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so others are okay. And then finally, this expense to tax reduction ratio. Just another thing to level the playing field and establish a baseline. I think I heard everyone was okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I think, Kathy, you had mentioned you weren't keen on that being used as a multiplier, but in general, you don't think we should be establishing points anyways. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm fine with the expense, with the ratio as a factor in our calculations, but because I'm not in favor of the point system, I don't think it should be a multiplier.
Okay, that's consistent and reasonable. So I think I have the group's broad views on the major points that we're looking at tonight. So unless anyone tells me otherwise, I'm
Closing the issue.
I'm going to move on. Yeah.
Moving on. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Kathy's got something.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I did have one question, and I forgot to ask it when you had the slide. What's a photo key?
The what?
Photo key.
Oh, it's a plot plan of the property with little triangle arrows and a number. Photo 1 is the front of the house from the northwest. Photo 2 is from the northeast. Photo 3 is the side of the house. It's kind of a standardized way to kind of document a property. And we would provide an example of that in the application package.
And that's something that just a regular person could put together,
Yeah. Mhm.
like fairly easily. Okay.
Yeah, when we talked about that with the commission, we talked about having an architect prepare the site plan long ago when we talked about that. I kind of realized that was a burdensome issue, especially with Google Aerials now. It's pretty easy to kind of sketch out a site plan that we'll be able to understand.
Thanks.
Okay.
Well, that was productive and
Yes.
over
Oh my
a fair
goodness.
amount of time, huh?
Okay, moving on to item C.
Okay, now I'm still catching up on
Okay.
my notes. So tax,
I'll read what item C is then. How about
thank
that?
you. Yeah.
Review of the 2018-2019 Certified Local Government CLG report. Review and comment on the CLG annual report for 2018 and 19, which Jay will do momentarily.
Unless you have any questions about the CLG, this is a report we do every year. We're supposed to bring it to the commission. We told them we were going to bring it on March 19th, and you know what happened. Some of it is boilerplate. Some of our answers are similar from year to year. The number of properties that we list and on the Mills Act are different. The weird thing about this is we work off of their annual system, October 1st of one year to September 30th of the next. So when we think of how many Mills Acts and Glendale registers we did in a calendar year, it's totally different for this. It all adds up in the end, though. So I don't really have anything to say about this unless anyone had any questions or concerns. It's not too late to submit revisions to the state, but this is a responsibility that all certified local government staff has to do for their cities.
I had one question. I was wondering if there's an update on when the South Glendale survey will be submitted to the Office of Historic Preservation.
Well, we tried to do it a few months ago, and they said they were so short-staffed and busy that they couldn't handle it and told me to call back in a few months. So we're trying to do it, and it's funny because I just, looking ahead at my calendar for next week, I'd put a reminder to check again on that, so.
That's a riot. I also had a comment to make, which is that I know in past years, but not for a while, I believe the CLG report was presented to the Historic Preservation Commission for feedback before it was submitted, and that it's happened after the fact now. And I just wanted to suggest that, it's possible that it might, this was a kind of uneventful year and a very strange, ended up being quite a strange year, but in future, I think that would be nice for the commission to be able to review it before it goes.
We have been able to do that some years we haven't. When the commission's had substantive changes, we've supplemented it, and SHPO accepts that without any issue. This year we were right on time, and now we're not. So, but they're very understanding. They initially extended the deadline, and then I think the deadline's just shot. So, but ours was put in time with the initial deadline. So, point taken, and we would always try to do that, and will in the future.
Thank you.
And then Jay, quickly, I was wondering if you could comment on the East-West community plan that was mentioned in the report. Excuse me.
Yeah, that is currently not actively being pursued. Aspects of it are through some other projects that we're doing through some Metro grants that are multimodal transportation oriented, that will have information that will feed into the East and West plans, but the actual development of the plans and preparation of them isn't happening right now, but it's still anticipated. So.
And those will be two separate plans. Has that been finalized?
I've heard both ways. Initially we thought it would be two plans. They may be done concurrently as two separate documents, so that we'll then have a north, south, east, and west. That's kind of probably an open discussion point still, but I'm not sure where that's going to go.
And then this might not be the right place to ask this question, but do you know if that decision or discussion will happen with the community, or how would that decision be made?
About whether to do it as one or two?
Yeah.
I don't know. Community plans are very community driven. If, say, we didn't go to the community and came back and you guys said, we want these as two plans, that would be heard. The issue is that the two neighborhoods have a lot of similarities, whereas North and South Glendale have great differences. So there would be a lot of overlap in terms of the research, the groundwork, the history. So certain things, I think it would be, just easier to do together. But how that plays out, we'll have to figure out hopefully soon. But I don't think any movement's going to happen this year on that. I haven't heard anything. But it's definitely on our long-range forecast agenda of things the department's working on. So.
And where would a survey fit within that? Do you have any idea?
Well, hopefully it would fit within it, just like it did in South Glendale. We did the North Glendale Community Plan without the benefit of a survey, unfortunately. And, you know, the idea is that at some point we'll backfill and do the survey for North Glendale. Hopefully we'd be doing the survey just like we did in South Glendale.
Okay. You just wouldn't know timing until we get there.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Any other questions about the CLG report? Okay.
None.
Okay, moving on. Item number 8, Community Development Department updates. A, update.
I'm gonna shift to the slides.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 8, which is update on Harrower Lab, Glendale Register number 18.
These are gonna be super fast.
Affordable Housing Project.
We'll be done before 10 p.m.
Woohoo!
Just kidding. Okay, most of you probably are familiar with the fact that the city has purchased the former Harrower Lab that was for many years the Tobin World School.
Yes, it was.
The city's goal is to do a rehabilitation of the 3 structures on the site into affordable housing. The site also includes a large parcel to the west across the alley that does not have any historic resources on it, so that's proposed for a larger affordable housing project. The city has recently issued requests for qualifications to bidders on both projects, so we're getting different sets of bidders, and we're looking at the Harrower Lab for bidders who have experience doing rehabilitation of historic structures for affordable housing projects, which isn't the biggest pool in the world, but there are developers out there who do that, so we anticipate getting some good bids. The city has retained Killefer Fleming Architects, KFA, as the architectural consultant on this, who's preparing the initial plans and kind of feasibility for the conversion. And the city's also retained Architectural Resources Group as the historic preservation consultant. The commission hopefully is secure in their trust of these 2 groups. If you're not familiar with KFA, they're one of the big preservation architecture firms. They have a lot of experience with historic resources, and they also do a lot of affordable housing work. ARG, I think everyone should be familiar with their work. They're one of the top consultants in Southern California, or in California. And the goal is for this not only to be a fantastic city-sponsored affordable housing project, but they're also going to be, or we are also applying for the federal rehabilitation tax credit, which is in process right now. To apply for the tax credit, it's pretty much the highest level of review any historic resource has to go through. It goes beyond what Glendale protects as a Glendale Register property in terms of also identifying interior features, spatial features, different things like that that are important. One thing that's been proposed is a 4th building on the site that would not be attached to the historic buildings, but would be connected to one of the buildings. This is important to provide additional units that will be built out by the developer, and that is one of the ways that this project becomes more and more feasible in terms of getting the quality of work that we're expecting. So that work will also be reviewed by all of this project will be reviewed by HPC once we have kind of a preliminary set of plans so that we understand exactly what's going to happen. So you'll be reviewing it as a Glendale Register property. The state will be reviewing it under the as the tax credit project, and the addition will only move forward with the addition if there's no concern on the parts of the SHPO or the city in terms of its impact on the historic resource. But what we're looking at right now, just in terms of massing models, is something that should be able to be very doable here. The building across the alley will also be reviewing, and HPC will have the ability to comment on that as a nearby property. That review will be similar to what was done when the ACE 121 project was built over here on Kenwood. which was adjacent to both the Glendale YMCA and the Glendale Post Office. So we brought that to HPC as an advisory item, since you don't have actual purview over that site, but you'll be able to review the project and comment on it before it goes for other design review approvals. So that's that.
Okay, any questions on that, anybody? Seeing none?
I have one question.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you know is the city moving forward with removing the plants from the brick?
Well, that will be part of the project, but those plants have been there for many, many years without anyone expressing concern. But yes, those plants will be removed, but unless you've seen something that you're asking about, we're not actively moving forward with removing anything right now that I know of.
Oh, I was under the impression that the city was pursuing that based on the hearing a few weeks or a month ago. Because it is that, I think it's a creeping fig. It is damaging to brick, and the fact that it's been there so long is actually cause for concern, not reassurance.
Yeah, no, well, it is a slow deterioration process. It's not ideal, though it can be very, very picturesque. But the goal ultimately is to remove the plant life from the facades of the building, repair and repoint any mortar joints that need it, and to restore it as the brick building. If you're looking at the slides, it'll look more like what you see on the left than what it does on the right when the project is finished. So,
Great.
Okay, thank you.
mm-hmm.
Item B, update on historic district surveys for South Cumberland Heights and Costa Verdugo, and an update on submission of nomination for the potential Bellhurst Historic District.
So ARG, who I just mentioned for the Harrower Lab, is the consultant working on our two ongoing historic district surveys for South Cumberland and Costa Verdugo. They have finished their field work, which was delayed by COVID, and then they developed protocols for them to get their staff back out in the field. They have finished the draft report. They're currently finishing up the DPR forms and the assessment of the contributing status of the various properties. And they tell me that they'll have a draft submitted on August 31st. So,
Wow.
so we're pretty good with that.
Then when does
The next step after we review the draft will be to bring that back to HPC. HPC will review the draft survey document. If you believe that it's fulfilled the requirements that we look for in our historic district surveys, you'll approve the draft. You'll make any comments that you think would help the draft become a better document in its final version. And if you do that, you'll also be authorizing the proponents to distribute their second, second petition around the community or the two neighborhoods. And they have 6 months to return the petitions, which are asking directly that the city designate these two districts. So I anticipate that if everything goes well and there's not any significant opposition, which we haven't heard about yet, or hopefully we don't, but you never know, we likely will have a couple of new historic districts in 2021. That would be on schedule. So,
Wow.
Yay.
then the third update is we've received
Jay,
a number.
sorry, quick question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I heard you say earlier that we're not having a September meeting. Is that true?
Unless we call a special meeting, we are not having a September meeting.
And I'm only asking that because if you really do get the report on August 31st, it would be nice if we could get the process going.
It would be delightful if staff could turn that around in 2 weeks. I can't think that that's going to happen. It is hard to pull meetings together every 2 to 3 months at this point, as you've seen even last year before all of this has happened. And the backlog's worse, and we've got, I don't need to go through all of that. But I do have the full expectation that it would come in the October hearing. And the only reason we'd call a special meeting is if there was some very pressing case that came to light that we don't know about right now. But I think that's reasonable turnaround for getting a draft, reviewing it, and writing a staff report indicating its key findings. So,
Great.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I didn't realize how much you have to do on the back end.
yeah, it's not just copying it or linking it to the website. So.
Item C, update on historic district brochure.
Oh, well, just not that we're running out of, that we
Oh,
have so
Bellhurst.
much time.
Sorry,
but
Bellhurst.
The residents in Bellhurst have submitted a nomination.
Sorry, Bellhurst.
Bellhurst is the Bellhurst is the neighborhood just to the west of Rosmoyne. Very similar in feel, different kind of street pattern, and a different developer. It was developed by the Lemert Company, who's very interesting as a development company in their own right. And originally, we received 2 applications, one for the lower portion, Bellhurst Park, and one for the hillside portion called Bellhurst Hill Slopes. I met with the proponents several months ago now and recommended that it would be easier if we just move this forward as one nomination for the entire Bellhurst subdivision, not the entire subdivision, but the area that they're choosing to nominate. And they agreed, and they've resubmitted a nomination that kind of merges the information from the 2 sections. And so that is something that I also hope to have for you in October. That's a priority for me to move along. So
For us to discuss their application.
for the initial review of the application, yeah. So October, maybe Historic District Month.
I have a question. Jay, I've asked you this before about the survey and the DPRs for South Cumberland Heights and Casa Verdugo. But I was not on the commission when I asked you this. Will ARG be identifying properties that are individually eligible for the Glendale Register?
No, that was not part of their contract. And the city has only done that in one survey that we've done. And we had some bad results from that. It would add significant costs to do that in an accurate way, because there's a big difference between what's called an intensive level survey and a windshield survey. And to do a good determination of what's really eligible for the register would require an intensive survey. I don't think it's appropriate to necessarily do that just based on how we see things from the street. Now I'm wondering if I'm wrong, because the initial Cumberland Heights survey did do that, and some of that got extended into the North Cumberland Heights neighborhood when that was designated individually as a district. And now I'm blanking. I think Royal Boulevard may have identified individual properties, but since then we haven't done that.
I just want to point out that the South Glendale Historic Resources Survey was not an intensive survey, and they identified properties that were eligible for the Glendale Register. I know that this is going to be a larger conversation to have, but I'm very disappointed that we are not taking this opportunity as part of this process to have them identify properties that are eligible. I don't think that it is more labor intensive. Since, even for the South Glendale Historic Resources Survey, they did not go all the way around the property. They didn't go onto the property at all. It's the same process. So I don't.
No, I understand what you're saying, and in general, looking at a historic district may be different. I'm not sure that what other cities do in terms of that, and it's something we could do in the future, but we have never put that into our contracts. The one time I know we did it was when it was a requirement from the State Preservation Office, and they do not have that requirement, or that was for a survey that was funded by the office. So I totally understand your point there. We had some unfortunate identifications of individually eligible properties from that earlier survey for properties that truly were not in the way we look at properties today eligible individually. Some of those were actually even designated in the earlier years of the commission when maybe things were a little less discriminating than they are now. But I'll raise that issue so that people know that you've mentioned it, because I know it's been raised before. And I don't want to say I don't understand the goal of doing that, but our experience with it has not panned out very well in terms of those people who receive the 5B status code, meaning they appear to be individually eligible as well as a contributor, that was done as well and as fairly as it would be done through a true intensive level survey. It also ignores properties that have either associations with events or people that are significant. We would never find that out through a survey. So we would be limiting our survey to only those pretty nice looking properties without the benefit to the other properties that may have other stories to tell.
Well, it doesn't preclude properties from being eligible, but it identifies ones that are likely eligible based on architectural.
Yeah, no, I get it. I hear you, and I'll mention that to our senior staff here, and see if people want to pursue that for future surveys or consider how other cities are doing it. You know, we always want to stay within the best practices of what is expected from CLGs and what other cities that are our peer group in the area do. But of course, we're not bound to do that. So, but I'll definitely look into it more as we think about Bellhurst. But it's definitely not something that's being done for the 2 current surveys.
Thank you.
Item C,
Item C is,
update on historic district brochure, which you've kind of given us a little bit of.
oh, I didn't put that on my slide. I started working on it. I was really hoping that would be done for this meeting. It's too weird. It's a technological issue as much as anything, and that's partly why this has been a mess for a long time. The reason I wanted to put it on here is just to remind you that we haven't forgotten about it. It's going to be worked on, and no promises, but maybe October, because I started work on it. A lot of it's already completed. It needs some fine tuning, and I think October is a likely time for that to make its debut. And by debut, that'll mean you guys will have a chance to review it. Public will review it, and then we'll make any changes that we need to, and then it'll be ready to be printed and distributed.
Awesome. Item 8C or D, depending on how we want to look at things.
Right.
Update on construction progress for the new garage at 1753 Hillcrest.
Okay, so we'll end on this positive note.
Yay!
Hillcrest was the house that didn't have a garage but had a big, ugly aluminum carport that was attached to the Glendale Register property. One of the Mills Act conditions was to build a new appropriately designed garage and remove the carport. This one is probably our worst case in terms of time deadlines passing and then repassing and repassing. These are not the current photos because I didn't have a chance to, or I didn't remember even to call the owners to get the latest, but these are the photos I was going to show you in March. In fact, I think these 2 photos you've already seen of the completed garage. The more important thing, and it's too bad that Desiree isn't here to see this. Hopefully she's watching. Desiree, I hope you're watching. I'll share them with you if I hear that you haven't been. Here's the carport. Here's the carport being dismantled. There's the guy up on the roof taking the roof off.
Wow.
There's the structure without the roof. Here's a view to the other side where you see the new garage in the background. And here's the view from March of the work being done. The owners of this house they get it. They care about the house. I'm pretty sure that when I get the updated photos, this band where the wood board was attached will have been repaired and painted. So I don't want you to think that it's going to just stay that way. But this fulfills their Mills Act conditions.
That's remarkable. Congratulations, Hillcrest.
I wanted to include that. I didn't have the annual update, which maybe we'll do the annual 2019 update of Mills Act work program completions in October of 2019. I'm sorry, 2020. But this is the one that's probably the most exciting development we've seen. So on that note,
Are you all done?
I'm done.
Yay! All right, well.
I just have one comment for IT. I think, Jay, if you can't see the rest of us in tile format, I think you need to. I think we need to have that interaction.
Let's see, they told me not to do this, but since you're telling me and you're a commissioner, I'm gonna do it. Stop sharing.
Well, I didn't know if you just didn't have the capability, that you just couldn't see us at all.
There it is.
Now I can see you all. Hello, everybody.
Makes the difference. Okay. Good night, everyone.
I do want to make one comment before we adjourn. We did have one caller for one of the items earlier, for the item about the implementing the program for the contributing properties. The president of the Historical Society, Steve Hunt, did call in to speak about that issue. He was on hold for a very, very long time, but he did have to go to a meeting. But I did want to mention, for those of you who are Historical Society members, he did call in on your behalf. He just unfortunately couldn't wait us out, which I don't blame him. That was a long one. So on that note, everybody, thank you for attending our meeting, and we are adjourned at 8:22. See you in October.